Tonight, you'll step into the past. You are a knight, preparing for the grandest tournament of your life. Over the next few hours, you will live through each moment as it unfolds. The quiet dawn before battle, the weight of your armor, the thunder of hooves, and the clash of steel in the joust. This story will move slowly, like the steady rhythm of a horse's stride, carrying you deeper into another time, another life. There is no rush, no need to hold on too tightly. Just listen, breathe, and let yourself sink into the world of honor and chivalry. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it? Whether it's the middle of the night or just a moment of quiet in your day, I'm glad you're here. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and step into the world of knights and tournaments. The journey begins. Toll in the distance, their deep resonance floating through the morning air. I groan softly, not quite ready to abandon the comfort of sleep. My back aches a bit. Damn that old training injury. But I push the discomfort aside and stir beneath layers of warm wool and linen. The stones of my chamber hold the night's chill, but my bed, elevated on its sturdy oak frame and enclosed by heavy brocade curtains, has kept me warm through the night. The light changes, golden rays now filtering through the narrow window, casting long shadows across the rush-strewn floor. Dust motes dance in the beams. I rub my eyes and yawn widely, feeling the scratch of my beard against my palm. Gods, I need to trim it soon. I breathe deeply, taking in the familiar scents of my chamber. Beeswax candles burned low during the night, the lingering sweetness of yesterday's frankincense, and the earthy smell of the stone walls that have stood for generations. Outside my chamber, the castle awakens. I hear the soft padding of servants' feet, the distant clatter from the kitchens below, and occasionally, the commanding voice of the steward directing the day's preparations. Someone drops something heavy and curses loudly, followed by hushed admonishments. The tournament brings a different energy to our daily rhythm, more urgent, more expectant. I stretch beneath the covers, feeling the pleasant ache in my muscles from yesterday's practice. My sword arm is strong, though not as quick as it once was. 20 years of tourneys and battles have left their marks. A scar across my shoulder, a slight stiffness in my knee when the weather turns. Getting old, Robert, I mutter to myself, testing my shoulder with a slow rotation. It pops audibly, not ideal for tournament day. A gentle knock at the door signals the arrival of Thomas, my squire of 7 years. Enter, I call, my voice still rough with sleep. The door creaks open, and Thomas appears, already dressed in his daily tunic, bearing a tray with a steaming cup and fresh clothing for the day. His face, still youthful at 19 summers, shows both excitement and nervousness. "Good morrow, Sir Robert," he says with a slight bow. "I've brought your morning cider. Cook added extra cinnamon and honey, as you prefer on tournament days." "Thank God," I mumble, sitting up and feeling the cool morning air hit me like a slap. I slept like the dead, but feel like I've been trampled by horses. I rub my face, trying to chase away the fog of sleep. "You're earlier than usual. The whole castle is astir, sir." Lord Geoffrey's men arrived before dawn, making a racket that woke half the servants. Knights from as far as Normandy have set up pavilions on the tournament field. Thomas places the tray on the small table by my bedside and moves to open the shutters fully. Sunlight floods the chamber now, making me squint and curse under my breath. It illuminates the tapestry on the wall, a hunting scene gifted to me by Count William after I served in his campaign against the northern rebels. My shield and sword hang on the opposite wall, polished to gleaming perfection by Thomas the previous evening. I take the warm cup between my hands, savoring the heat that seeps into my fingers. Sweet mercy, I sigh after the first sip spreads warmth through my chest. Sweet apple mingled with sharp cinnamon and cloves. The honey soothes my throat, preparing my voice for the commands I'll need to issue later. I drain half the cup in 3 long gulps. And my armor? I ask, though I already know the answer. Thomas takes great pride in his duties. Laid out in the antechamber, sir. I've checked each strap and buckled twice over. The smith returned your helm yesterday. The visor moves smoothly now. I nod approvingly and swing my legs over the edge of the bed. The stone floor is cold beneath my bare feet, shocking enough to make me hiss through my teeth. Christ's bones, that's cold. The bracing sensation helps chase away the last vestiges of sleep. I stand, stretching my full height, rolling my shoulders to loosen the night's stiffness. Thomas moves efficiently around the chamber, laying out my undertunic of soft linen, then the padded gambeson that will protect my skin from the chafing of chainmail. My finest surcoat waits as well, deep blue wool embroidered with my family crest and silver thread. The routine is familiar, comforting in its predictability. I wash my face and hands in the basin of water Thomas has brought, splashing the coolness against my skin and snorting as droplets catch in my nostrils. I run wet fingers through my hair and beard, where strands of gray now mingle with the brown. More gray than yesterday, I'd wager, I mutter, examining a silver strand between my fingers. As I dress, Thomas speaks of the competitors, sharing what he's learned from the other squires, who rides which destrier, which knights have won recent tourneys in neighboring counties. Thomas, I listen with half an ear, my mind already turning to my own preparations, visualizing the weight of the lance in my hand, the rhythm of my horse beneath me. Lord Geoffrey's new champion is said to be fearsome, Thomas says as he helps me into my gambeson. Sir Alain from Aquitaine, they say he's unhorsed 12 knights without defeat this season. Every champion falls eventually, I reply, feeling the comfortable weight of the padded garment settle on my shoulders. I wince slightly as it presses against a bruise from practice. Remember when I faced Sir William the Black in Shrewsbury? Thomas grins. When you broke 3 lances against him before he yielded. After the 4th pass, I correct with a smile, and it was his choice to yield. A wise one. He fought bravely in the king's service the very next month. Thomas, I don't mention how my ribs had ached for weeks after that encounter. Some details a knight keeps to himself. Once dressed in my day clothes, I move to the window, looking out across the castle bailey below. My bladder protests, and I make a mental note to visit the privy before heading to the hall. Below, the bailey teems with activity. Servants carrying wood for fires, stable boys leading destriers to water, merchants setting up stalls to sell their wares to the gathered crowd. Beyond the castle walls, colorful pavilions dot the tournament field, banners snapping in the morning breeze. My own pavilion will be there, erected by Thomas yesterday, blue and silver like my surcoat. Beneath it, my armor will await final adjustments before the herald's call. We should break our fast, I say, turning from the window. The day will be long, and I'll need my strength. My stomach growls loudly as if to emphasize the point, making Thomas smile. Thomas nods and moves to the door, ready to accompany me down to the great hall where the household gathers each morning. I pause before my shield, touching the cool metal surface with reverent fingers, tracing the familiar emblem that has been my family's for generations. Today I carry not only my own honor but that of my lineage, my lord, and all those who have placed their faith in my sword arm. The tournament is more than sport. It is a demonstration of worth, a chance to prove that the values of chivalry still hold meaning in our changing world. I take a deep breath, centering myself in this moment of quiet, before the day's exertions begin. Right then I mutter, more to myself than to Thomas, let's go show these young pups what experience can do. The bells toll again, marking the hour. It is time to descend, to join the flow of the day that will carry me to the tournament field. I straighten my surcoat one final time and nod to Thomas. Come, I say, let us see what fortune awaits us today. As we step into the corridor, the castle's sounds envelop us, the tapestry of life that has endured through centuries and will continue long after my name is forgotten. But today, for this one gleaming moment, I am part of its story, a knight with aching joints and a stubborn heart, preparing to uphold ancient ideals in the proving ground of the tournament field. Dressing in fine garments and inspecting the armory, Thomas and I make our way to the small antechamber adjoining my sleeping quarters, where my finer garments await. The morning air still holds a bite, and I'm grateful for the brazier Thomas lit earlier, its coals glowing orange in the corner. Let's not tarry, I say, stretching my neck from side to side. I'd rather not keep Lord Geoffrey waiting when he arrives for the pre-tournament council. Thomas nods, his movements quick but careful, as he retrieves my finest undertunic from the wooden chest along the wall. The linen is softer than my everyday garments, bleached nearly white. A small luxury that cost me dearly, but appearances matter on tournament days. Arms up, sir, Thomas says, and I comply, like a child being dressed by its mother. I chuckle at the thought. What amuses you? Thomas asks, pulling the tunic down over my head. Just thinking how peculiar this would seem to a common man, a grown knight being dressed like a babe. The fabric settles cool against my skin, and I adjust the sleeves, though I'd wager they'd change their mind if they tried to don armor without help. Thomas smiles as he retrieves my deep blue surcoat, the silver embroidery catching the light. Indeed, sir, my father was a tanner, and he dressed himself in the same tunic for 20 years. He'd scarcely believe the clothing a knight requires. The surcoat slips over my head, and I feel its weight, not just the physical heft of the wool and thread, but the weight of my family's crest emblazoned across the chest. 3 silver falcons against a blue field, wings outstretched in flight. My father wore this same device, as did his father before him. Is the belt too tight? Thomas asks, cinching the leather around my waist. I take a deep breath, feeling the slight restriction. No, it's good. Not so loose that it flaps during the joust, not so tight I can't breathe. I pat my stomach, though perhaps I should have been more moderate at the Christmas feast. With my fine clothes properly arranged, Thomas retrieves my soft leather boots, polished to a rich brown shine. I sit on a small stool and extend my legs, one at a time, as he fits each boot and laces it snugly. Now, I say, standing and feeling the change in my bearing that comes with proper attire. To the armory, we descend the winding stone stairs, my hand tracing the familiar groove worn into the wall by countless palms over the centuries. The castle awakens further with each step we take. Servants hurrying past with baskets of bread, chamberlains consulting scrolls of parchment, a pair of hunting dogs trotting after a page boy. The scent of baking bread and wood smoke fills the corridors, mingling with the mustier smell of old stone. Good fortune today, Sir Robert, calls the castle steward as we pass. God's blessing on your aim, adds a scullery maid, ducking her head shyly when I smile my thanks. The stairs continue downward, spiraling into cooler air. The smells shift, less bread and humanity, more iron and leather. The armory lies beneath the main bailey, partly below ground where cool temperatures help prevent rust from claiming the precious metal. Thomas pushes open the heavy oak door, and we step into a long chamber lit by wall-mounted torches and narrow window slits near the ceiling. The dancing flames cast moving shadows across rows of spears, swords, and polearms hanging on the walls. Shields bearing the devices of Lord Geoffrey's knights lean against rough wooden racks, and suits of mail hang like hollow men from wooden frames. The familiar smell greets me, oil, metal, and leather, undercut by the earthiness of the stone floor. It's a scent that has meant preparation and purpose throughout my life as a knight. I breathe it in deeply, feeling my mind focus. Sir Robert, a booming voice echoes across the chamber. I'd begun to think you'd sleep through the tournament itself. Aldwin, the castle blacksmith, emerges from a side alcove. His massive frame blocks the torchlight momentarily, casting him in silhouette. His leather apron is stained with the marks of his trade, and his forearms bear the scars of decades at the forge. And miss the chance to unhorse Geoffrey's new champion. Not likely, I reply, clasping his calloused hand. Besides, you promised me a reforged blade, and I'd not miss seeing it. Aldwin's grin splits his soot-streaked face. Aye, and it's a beauty. Come, see for yourself. He leads us to a workbench along the far wall where various tools lie scattered among pieces of armor in need of repair. With a flourish that seems odd from such large hands, he pulls away a cloth to reveal my sword. Sweet Mary, I whisper, taking in the gleaming length of steel. The blade catches the torchlight and holds it, a ribbon of fire running along its edge. The crossguard has been polished until the edged falcon seems ready to take flight, and the leather grip is fresh, wrapped tightly for a sure hold. I pick it up, feeling its familiar weight and balance. Aldwin has worked miracles. The blade that had developed a hairline crack near the hilt now shows no sign of weakness. I folded it thrice more. Aldwin says proudly, worked the steel until dawn for 3 nights. It'll not fail you now, not if I've anything to say about it. I test the edge with my thumb, just the lightest touch. A thin line of blood appears instantly, and I laugh, sharp enough to shave with. I wouldn't recommend it. Aldwin chuckles. Your pretty face might not survive the attempt. Thomas has moved to where my armor stands displayed on its frame. Plate for the shoulders and chest, fine chain mail beneath, greaves for the legs, and gauntlets for the hands. Each piece bears the marks of battles past, small dents and scratches that tell the story of my years of service. Shall I begin preparing your armor, sir? Thomas asks, already checking the leather straps that will secure the plate to my body. Not yet, I reply, sheathing the sword in its tooled leather scabbard. I'd inspect everything first. Tournament rules allow for sword combat should lances break evenly. I move methodically down the row of equipment, checking each piece with care born of experience. My fingers test the links of mail, seeking any weakness or break. I flex the leather beneath the armor plates, ensuring it hasn't stiffened too much with age. The weight of my helm rests in my hands as I check the visor's movement. Smooth now thanks to Aldwin's work. Your shield, sir, Thomas says, bringing forward the kite-shaped protection painted with my device. The wood is solid oak, covered in layers of linen and leather before being painted. I run my hand over its surface, feeling for any splinters or weaknesses. It'll hold, I murmur, more to myself than to the others, though God willing it won't need to. Aldwin moves to another table and returns with a lance, 12 feet of solid ash tapered to a blunted point for tournament use. I've prepared 3 of these, he says, perfectly balanced as you prefer. I lift the lance, testing its weight, sighting along its length. Good work, Aldwin. If I fail today, it won't be for want of proper equipment. A horn sounds above us, its note muffled by the thick stone walls but still recognizable, the signal that calls knights to break their fast in the great hall before the tournament preparations begin in earnest. That's our summons, I say, returning the lance to Aldwin's care. Have everything brought to my pavilion after the meal. I'll want to arm early and walk Thunderer before the lists open. Aldwin nods, already carefully wrapping my sword and armor pieces for transport to the tournament field. I take one last look around the armory at the tools of my profession gleaming in the torchlight. Each represents the possibility of glory or defeat, of honor maintained or lost. Come, Thomas, I say, squaring my shoulders beneath my fine surcoat. Let's fill our bellies before filling the spectators' eyes with pageantry. As we climb the stairs back toward daylight and the sounds of the bustling castle, I find my mind turning toward the meal ahead, and the faces of the knights I'll soon meet across the tournament table before facing them on the field of honor. Thomas and I make our way to the small antechamber adjoining my sleeping quarters, where my finer garments await. The morning air still holds a bite, and I'm grateful for the brazier Thomas lit earlier, its coals glowing orange in the corner. Let's not tarry, I say, stretching my neck from side to side. I'd rather not keep Lord Geoffrey waiting when he arrives for the pre-tournament council. Thomas nods, his movements quick but careful as he retrieves my finest undertunic from the wooden chest along the wall. The linen is softer than my everyday garments, bleached nearly white, a small luxury that cost me dearly, but appearances matter on tournament days. Arms up, sir, Thomas says, and I comply like a child being dressed by its mother. I chuckle at the thought. What amuses you? Thomas asks, pulling the tunic down over my head. Just thinking how peculiar this would seem to a common man, a grown knight being dressed like a babe. The fabric settles cool against my skin, and I adjust the sleeves, though I'd wager they'd change their mind if they tried to don armor without help. Thomas smiles as he retrieves my deep blue surcoat, the silver embroidery catching the light. Indeed, sir, my father was a tanner, and he dressed himself in the same tunic for 20 years. He'd scarcely believe the clothing a knight requires. The surcoat slips over my head, and I feel its weight, not just the physical heft of the wool and thread, but the weight of my family's crest emblazoned across the chest. 3 silver falcons against a blue field, wings outstretched in flight. My father wore this same device, as did his father before him. Is the belt too tight? Thomas asks, cinching the leather around my waist. I take a deep breath, feeling the slight restriction. No, it's good. Not so loose that it flaps during the joust. Not so tight I can't breathe. I pat my stomach, though perhaps I should have been more moderate at the Christmas feast. With my fine clothes properly arranged, Thomas retrieves my soft leather boots, polished to a rich brown shine. I sit on a small stool and extend my legs, one at a time, as he fits each boot and laces it snugly. Now, I say, standing and feeling the change in my bearing that comes with proper attire, to the armory. We descend the winding stone stairs, my hand tracing the familiar groove worn into the wall by countless palms over the centuries. The castle awakens further with each step we take, servants hurrying past with baskets of bread, chamberlains consulting scrolls of parchment, a pair of hunting dogs trotting after a page boy. The scent of baking bread and wood smoke fills the corridors, mingling with the mustier smell of old stone. Good fortune today, Sir Robert, calls the castle steward as we pass. God's blessing on your aim, adds a scullery maid, ducking her head shyly when I smile my thanks. The stairs continue downward, spiraling into cooler air. The smells shift, less bread and humanity, more iron and leather. The armory lies beneath the main bailey, partly below ground where cool temperatures help prevent rust from claiming the precious metal. Thomas pushes open the heavy oak door, and we step into a long chamber lit by wall-mounted torches and narrow window slits near the ceiling. The dancing flames cast moving shadows across rows of spears, swords, and polearms hanging on the walls. Shields bearing the devices of Lord Geoffrey's knights lean against rough wooden racks, and suits of mail hang like hollow men from wooden frames. The familiar smell greets me, oil, metal, and leather, undercut by the earthiness of the stone floor. It's a scent that has meant preparation and purpose throughout my life as a knight. I breathe it in deeply, feeling my mind focus. Sir Robert, a booming voice echoes across the chamber. I'd begun to think you'd sleep through the tournament itself. Aldwin, the castle blacksmith, emerges from a side alcove. His massive frame blocks the torchlight momentarily, casting him in silhouette. His leather apron is stained with the marks of his trade, and his forearms bear the scars of decades at the forge. And miss the chance to unhorse Geoffrey's new champion. Not likely, I reply, clasping his calloused hand. Besides, you promised me a reforged blade, and I'd not miss seeing it. Aldwin's grin splits his soot-streaked face. And it's a beauty. Come, see for yourself. He leads us to a workbench along the far wall, where various tools lie scattered among pieces of armor in need of repair. With a flourish that seems odd from such large hands, he pulls away a cloth to reveal my sword. Sweet Mary, I whisper, taking in the gleaming length of steel. The blade catches the torchlight and holds it, a ribbon of fire running along its edge. The crossguard has been polished until the etched falcon seems ready to take flight, and the leather grip is fresh, wrapped tightly for a sure hold. I pick it up, feeling its familiar weight and balance. Aldwin's worked miracles. The blade that had developed a hairline crack near the hilt now shows no sign of weakness. I folded it thrice more, Aldwin says proudly. Worked the steel until dawn for 3 nights. It'll not fail you now. Not if I've anything to say about it. I test the edge with my thumb. Just the lightest touch. A thin line of blood appears instantly, and I laugh. Sharp enough to shave with. I wouldn't recommend it, Aldwin chuckles. Your pretty face might not survive the attempt. Thomas has moved to where my armor stands displayed on its frame. Plate for the shoulders and chest, fine chainmail beneath, greaves for the legs and gauntlets for the hands. Each piece bears the marks of battles past, small dents and scratches that tell the story of my years of service. Shall I begin preparing your armor, sir? Thomas asks, already checking the leather straps that will secure the plate to my body. Not yet, I reply, sheathing the sword in its tooled leather scabbard. I'd inspect everything first. Tournament rules allow for sword combat should lances break evenly. I move methodically down the row of equipment, checking each piece with care born of experience. My fingers test the links of mail, seeking any weakness or break. I flex the leather beneath the armor plates, ensuring it hasn't stiffened too much with age. The weight of my helm rests in my hands as I check the visor's movement. Smooth now thanks to Aldwin's work. Your shield, sir, Thomas says, bringing forward the kite-shaped protection painted with my device. The wood is solid oak, covered in layers of linen and leather before being painted. I run my hand over its surface, feeling for any splinters or weaknesses. It'll hold, I murmur, more to myself than to the others, though God willing it won't need to. Aldwin moves to another table and returns with a lance, 12 feet of solid ash, tapered to a blunted point for tournament use. I've prepared 3 of these, he says, perfectly balanced as you prefer. I lift the lance, testing its weight, sighting along its length. Good work, Aldwin. If I fail today, it won't be for want of proper equipment. A horn sounds above us, its note muffled by the thick stone walls but still recognizable, the signal that calls knights to break their fast in the great hall before the tournament preparations begin in earnest. That's our summons, I say, returning the lance to Aldwin's care. Have everything brought to my pavilion. After the meal, I'll want to arm early and walk Thunderer before the lists open. Aldwin nods, already carefully wrapping my sword and armor pieces for transport to the tournament field. I take one last look around the armory, at the tools of my profession gleaming in the torchlight. Each represents the possibility of glory or defeat, of honor maintained or lost. Come, Thomas, I say, squaring my shoulders beneath my fine surcoat. Let's fill our bellies before filling the spectators' eyes with pageantry. As we climb the stairs back toward daylight and the sounds of the bustling castle, I find my mind turning toward the meal ahead and the faces of the knights I'll soon meet across the tournament table before facing them on the field of honor. Breakfast among lords and rivals. The scent reaches me before I even enter the great hall. Roasted meats, fresh bread, and honey mingling in the air like a promise. My stomach growls appreciatively as Thomas and I descend the last of the worn stone steps. The sound of many voices, laughter, and the clatter of wooden trenchers grows louder with each step. Remember, I mutter to Thomas, adjusting my surcoat one last time. Keep your ears open. Tournament days bring loose tongues. Who's nursing old injuries? Who drank too deeply last night? I want to know it all. Thomas nods discreetly as we pause at the massive oak doors. Two of Lord William's guards, Gilbert and Hugh, stand at attention, though Gilbert's eyes brighten in recognition. Sir Robert, he acknowledges with a nod. Good hunting in the lists today. My thanks, Gilbert, I reply. Your brother still serves with the Western garrison. Aye, sir, sends word he's well. These small connections matter. A knight remembering a guard's family earns loyalty beyond what mere rank commands. I've learned this lesson well over the years. The doors swing open, and the full sensory assault of the great hall washes over me. The ceiling soars high above, wooden beams darkened by decades of smoke from the central hearth. Banners hang from the rafters, Lord William's golden eagle on crimson, the royal arms and standards of noble families aligned with our house. Morning light streams through high windows, catching dust motes that dance above the assembled company. At the high table sits Lord William himself, deep in conversation with Lord Geoffrey, whose lands border our own to the east. Their relationship has always been cordial, but cautious, like two wolves acknowledging each other's territories. Lady Matilda, our lord's wife, sits beside them, her gown of deep green velvet setting off her auburn hair, now streaked with dignified silver. The hall is filled with trestle tables where knights, squires, and other members of the household break their fast. I scan the faces quickly, noting familiar and foreign countenances alike. Tournament days bring visitors from across the realm, each with their own ambitions and rivalries. Sir Robert, Lord William's voice booms across the hall. Conversations pause momentarily as heads turn in my direction. Come join us. A rare honor, the high table is usually reserved for the most noble guests. I feel eyes following me as I make my way through the hall, nodding acknowledgments to fellow knights. Thomas peels away to join the other squires at their designated table. My lord, I bow slightly as I reach the dais. You honor me. Nonsense. Lord William waves a hand dismissively. Lord Geoffrey was just asking after you. He remembers your showing at Hereford last summer. Lord Geoffrey, a barrel-chested man with a carefully trimmed beard, raises his cup. 3 bouts, 3 victories. Impressive for a man no longer in the first flush of youth. His tone walks the line between compliment and subtle jab. I smile thinly. Age brings wisdom about when to strike, my lord. Sometimes the eager hound misses what the patient hunter sees clearly. A servant appears at my elbow with a pewter cup of watered wine and a trencher filled with slices of roasted venison, a chunk of cheese and bread still warm from the ovens. My mouth waters at the sight. Please, eat. Lady Matilda gestures graciously. You'll need your strength today. The bread tears easily in my hands, releasing a puff of steam. I dip a piece into a small bowl of honey, savoring the sweetness as it melts on my tongue. The venison is seasoned with rosemary and salt, perfectly cooked, a testament to Lord William's excellent kitchens. As I eat, I listen more than I speak. Lord Geoffrey mentions his champion, Sir Elaine, with barely concealed pride. Undefeated this season, he says again, clearly ensuring I overhear. They say his lance strikes true as God's judgment. From further down the table, a voice interjects. God's judgment occasionally shows mercy. I've seen no such quality in Sir Elaine's contests. I glance up to see Sir Edmund, a weathered knight perhaps 5 years my senior. His left arm bears the slight stiffness of an old wound poorly healed. We've crossed paths in a dozen tournaments over the years, developing the peculiar friendship that grows between men who have tried earnestly to unhorse each other. Sir Edmund, I acknowledge with genuine warmth. I didn't know you'd arrived. Late last night, he replies, raising his cup in greeting. My old bones protest traveling more each year, but I wouldn't miss seeing you fall on your arse today for all the gold in London. I laugh. spraying crumbs inelegantly. Bold words from a man I've dunked in the mud 3 tourneys running. It was twice, you lying dog, he counters good-naturedly. And I was ill the second time. Ill with fear, perhaps, I grin, tearing off another piece of bread. Across the hall the doors open again, and a hush falls momentarily. A tall knight enters, his surcoat bearing unfamiliar arms azure with a silver falcon. Even from this distance I can see his confident stride, the way younger knights step aside respectfully, or warily. "Ah, Lord," Geoffrey says with poorly disguised satisfaction. Sir Elaine joins us. The knight moves through the hall with the practiced awareness of a predator. His eyes, sharp blue even at this distance, scan the assembled company and land, inevitably on me. He's younger than I expected, perhaps 30 summers, with the build of a man who trains relentlessly. A faint scar traces his jawline, disappearing into a neatly trimmed black beard. Sir Elaine approaches the high table and bows with perfect courtly grace. "My lords, my lady." His voice carries a subtle accent of southern lands. "I pray I find you well this fine morning." Lord William acknowledges him with a nod. "Welcome, Sir Elaine. I trust your accommodations are satisfactory." "Most generous, my lord." His gaze shifts to me. "And this must be Sir Robert. Your reputation precedes you." I wipe my hands on a cloth before responding. "As does yours, Sir Elaine. I look forward to seeing your skill firsthand." "Perhaps sooner than later," he replies with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He raises his cup slightly. "To honorable combat." I match his gesture. "To honor." The unspoken challenge hangs between us like a drawn sword. At the far end of the hall, minstrels have begun to play. A young man with a lute and an older fellow with a small hand drum. Their song is an old favorite, recounting the legendary joust between Sir Thomas the Bold and the Black Knight of Cornwall. Fitting choice for a tournament day. The hall has filled completely now, alive with conversation, laughter, and the simple sounds of hunger being satisfied. Servants weave between tables, refilling cups and replacing empty platters. The smell of food mingles with wood smoke, beeswax candles, and the earthy scent of many bodies gathered in one space. Sir Edmund leans closer. "This Elaine," he mutters, voice low enough that only I can hear. "Watched him at Winchester." He favors a thrust to the left shoulder after the initial pass, quick to wheel his mount back too. I nod almost imperceptibly. This is the brotherhood of knights, rivals in the lists but united in the understanding that tomorrow's opponent might be tomorrow's battlefield ally. "My thanks," I murmur, finishing my wine. A trumpet sounds in the distance, the first call signaling an hour before the tournament's opening ceremonies. The hall stirs with renewed purpose. Knights begin to rise, squires hurrying to their sides. Well, Lord William sets aside his napkin. "It seems the day calls us to our duties." He looks at me with genuine regard. "Carry our colors proudly, Sir Robert." I stand and bow. "With all honor, my lord." As Thomas appears at my shoulder, I cast one final glance at Sir Elaine, who returns my gaze steadily. "To the lists then," I say, more to myself than anyone else. The food has fortified my body. The company has sharpened my mind. Now comes the moment to prove my worth once more, to add another verse to the song of my life as a knight. I touch the small wooden cross concealed beneath my tunic, a gift from my mother long departed, and turn toward the door. The waiting armor, the nervous excitement of my destrier, the roar of the crowd all beckon me forward into the day's glory and peril. Riding through the castle courtyard, Thomas brings Thunderheart from the stables. My destrier of 7 years, 17 hands of muscle and spirit, coal black save for a splash of white between his eyes. The stable master holds his bridle while Thomas makes a final adjustment to the saddle. I approach slowly, allowing Thunderheart to catch my scent. "There's my old friend," I murmur, stroking his powerful neck. The horse snorts in recognition, bumping his head against my chest. "Eager for the lists, are you?" Thunderheart paws at the ground, as if understanding my words. I've never been one for the notion that horses comprehend human speech, but after countless battles and tournaments together, it's hard not to believe we share some deeper connection. He's been restless all morning, Sir Robert, the stable master says, his gnarled hands steady on the bridle. Knows what day it is, I'd wager. I check the saddle myself, running my hands along the leather straps. Thomas has done his work well, as always. Ready, lad? I ask, glancing at my squire. Thomas nods, his face a mixture of excitement and nerves. Yes, sir. Your helm and lance await at the pavilion. With practiced ease, I mount Thunderheart, feeling the momentary strain in my knee as I swing my leg over. The saddle creaks slightly beneath my weight. I settle into the familiar seat, my body remembering its place through years of training. The world looks different from horseback, higher, more commanding. I straighten my back, feeling the weight of my chainmail beneath my surcoat. Christ's bones, but this mail gets heavier every year, I mutter, adjusting my position slightly. Thomas pretends not to hear, but the stable master chuckles knowingly. We move toward the main courtyard, Thunderheart's hooves clattering against the stone path. The rhythm is soothing. Clack, 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 a heartbeat of iron on stone. Thomas walks alongside, carrying my shield. Its weight would tire him on a longer journey, but the boy has grown stronger this past year. Pride swells in my chest as I watch him match our pace without complaint. The narrow passage opens to the castle's main courtyard, and all at once, the full chaos of tournament day engulfs us. The space teems with activity, a living tapestry of medieval life in all its colorful, noisy glory. The scents hit me first: horse sweat, wood smoke, hot metal from the forge, roasting meat from vendors' stalls, and the underlying tang of too many bodies gathered in one place. Blacksmiths hammer relentlessly at their anvils, the metallic ping 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 echoing off stone walls. Sparks shower around them like golden rain as they make last-minute repairs to armor and weapons. A smith's apprentice, face smudged with soot, pumps bellows that make the forge fire roar higher, his thin arms working tirelessly. Make way for Sir Robert of Westmoreland, Thomas calls, his young voice carrying surprisingly well above the din. Heads turn at the announcement. A path clears before us, though the courtyard remains crowded. I nod acknowledgments as we pass, to the castle steward supervising preparations, to fellow knights already mounted and waiting, to merchants who bow slightly, hoping for noble patronage. Near the well, a cluster of children pause in their play to stare open-mouthed at the procession of knights. A small boy, perhaps 7 summers old, points directly at me. That's Sir Robert the Steadfast, he exclaims loudly. My father says he once held a bridge against 12 French knights. I can't help but smile beneath my mustache. The tale grows more impressive each time it's told. It was only 8 Frenchmen, and I had 3 good archers with me. Still, no harm in letting the story flourish. I toss the lad a small copper coin, which he catches with wide-eyed wonder. Perhaps you'll hold bridges yourself someday, young man, I call down to him. His grin could outshine the sun. We continue across the courtyard, where a herald stands upon a wooden platform, unrolling a long parchment scroll. His tabard displays Lord William's colors, crimson and gold, bright against the gray stone backdrop. He clears his throat with self-importance before projecting his voice across the yard. Hear ye, let it be known to all gentles and commons alike, that on this day, the feast of St. Michael, by the grace of God and under the auspices of Lord William of Ravenswood, a grand tournament shall commence. The herald continues reading the names of competing knights, each announcement met with cheers or murmurs from the gathering crowd. Thunderheart shifts beneath me, responding to my unconscious tension as we wait. Sir Edmund of Hartwood, Sir Guy of the Green Vale, Sir Alan of Aquitaine, champion of Lord Geoffrey. A particularly loud cheer rises for Sir Alan. I glance across the courtyard to see him atop a magnificent gray stallion, his armor gleaming silver in the morning light. Our eyes meet briefly, a moment of silent acknowledgement between predators. Sir Robert of Westmoreland, Knight of Lord William's household. The locals cheer loudly. I've served this castle for 15 years, and they claim me as their own. A woman's voice calls out, "God's blessing on you, Sir Robert." I raise a hand in thanks, feeling a curious mix of pride and humility wash over me. "They love you well," comes a voice to my right. Sir Edmund guides his chestnut mare alongside Thunderheart. His armor bears the dents and scratches of many campaigns, a veteran's badge of honor. They love any knight who keeps their children safe and their taxes reasonable. I reply with a wry smile. Edmund laughs, the sound muffled by his beard. "True enough. How's that knee of yours today? Better than your sword arm, old man." "We'll see about that." He grins, competitive spirit undimmed by age. First round pairings are posted. "You're against young Sir Baldwin." I nod thoughtfully. "The Earl's nephew. Green lad, but quick with a lance. Quick to fall, I'd wager. Try not to humiliate him too thoroughly. His uncle has a temper." Across the courtyard, squires hurry about with last-minute preparation. One struggles with an unwieldy lance nearly twice his height, its tip freshly painted. Another polishes a helmet until it catches the light like a mirror. The air of anticipation is palpable, hanging over the yard like summer heat. A group of townsfolk have gathered by the outer gate, pointing and discussing the assembled knights. I catch fragments of their conversation, wagers being placed, reputations assessed, past glories recounted with varying degrees of accuracy. Wager 3 shillings on Sir Robert, but Sir Alan unhorsed the Duke's champion at Winchester. Heard Sir Edmund's shoulder never healed proper after Shrewsbury. Thunderheart grows restless beneath me, sensing the excitement. He prances sideways a few steps, eager to run. I gentle him with practiced ease, leaning forward to speak near his ear. "Patience, old friend. Save your strength for when it matters." The trumpet sounds again, its clear note cutting through the courtyard clamor. This is the second call. The tournament will begin within the half-hour. Thunderheart's ears prick forward at the sound, understanding its meaning as well as any human. "Time to proceed to the field," I tell Thomas, who nods and adjusts his grip on my shield. As we move toward the castle's main gate, the crowds part before us. Sunlight streams through the open portcullis ahead, illuminating the path forward like God's own blessing. Beyond those walls lies the tournament field, where honor and skill will soon be tested. I draw a deep breath, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest. Not fear, exactly, but the keen awareness that comes before combat. My hand drops briefly to the small pouch at my belt, where I carry a lock of my daughter's hair and a scrap of my wife's handkerchief. Reminders of why I ride, why I fight, why I return. "Ready, Sir Robert?" Thomas asks, looking up at me with admiration that still, after all these years, warms my heart. I nod, straightening in the saddle. Ready as 20 years of tournaments can make a man. I grin down at him. "Let's go show these young peacocks what a proper knight looks like in the saddle." The great gate looms before us now. Beyond it, I can see the colorful pavilions, the fluttering banners, the stands where lords and ladies await the spectacle. Thunderheart's hooves strike a final resonant rhythm against the courtyard stones as we pass from the castle's shelter into the bright promise of the tournament field. Sparring with the swordmaster. The mid-morning sun bathes the practice yard in golden light. As I step through the wooden gate, my boots sink slightly into the packed earth, softened by yesterday's light rain. The familiar scents of leather, sweat, and oil hang in the air, the honest perfume of warriors at work. In one corner, squires drill with wooden swords, their enthusiastic grunts punctuating each swing. Along the western wall, archers loose arrows at straw targets with rhythmic thwacks. But my eyes are drawn to the center of the yard, where he waits. Master Roland stands with the patience of an oak that has weathered 100 winters. His hair and beard have gone completely white, but his spine remains straight as a lance. In his youth, they called him Roland Swiftblade, and kings vied for his service. Now in his 60th year, he serves only the pursuit of perfect form. He acknowledges my approach with a slight nod, his keen eyes missing nothing. Not the way I favor my right leg after yesterday's practice, nor the stiffness in my shoulder from sleeping awkwardly. "Sir Robert," he says, his voice as weathered as old leather, "I thought perhaps you might forgo our session. What with the tournament tomorrow?" I shake my head, rolling my shoulders to loosen them. The day I'm too important to learn is the day they should put me in the ground. Master Roland, a hint of a smile crosses his face. A rare sight indeed. Wise words for a man still young enough to be foolish. He gestures to the rack of training weapons. "Your choice today?" I select a practice sword. Heavier than my tournament blade, but balanced similarly. The weight feels good in my hand, grounding me to this moment, to this place. Thomas hurries forward to help me remove my cloak and surcoat, leaving me in my linen shirt and breeches. A small crowd has begun to gather, younger squires mostly, abandoning their own practice to watch. I hear my name whispered among them, feel their eyes following my movements. Once such attention made me nervous. Now it simply reminds me of my responsibility to demonstrate what a lifetime of dedication looks like. "Begin with the forms," Master Roland instructs, taking his own position 6 paces away. I center myself with a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill my lungs. The world narrows to the space between us, everything else falling away like mist burned off by sunlight. My feet find their positions instinctively, shoulders relaxed, knees slightly bent. The first form is simple, a series of basic cuts and parries, performed slowly, deliberately. Our swords move in perfect mirror, the metal catching sunlight and throwing it back in bright flashes. The familiar movements warm my muscles, each position flowing into the next like water seeking its course. "Good," Roland murmurs as we complete the sequence. Again, but with purpose. Imagine each cut meets flesh and bone. We begin again. This time, I visualize an opponent before me. Not a faceless enemy, but Sir Elaine, with his cold eyes and perfect form. My blade slices the air with controlled power. Sweat begins to bead on my forehead, trickling down my temple. "Better," Roland says. "Now defend." Without warning, his blade comes alive, no longer moving in harmony with mine, but seeking openings in my guard. For a man of his years, his speed remains remarkable. I parry his first strike, the impact jarring up my arm despite the blunted edges. "Watch my eyes, not my sword," he admonishes, circling to my left. His next attack comes as a feint to my high line, then darts low toward my thigh. I block it, but barely, stepping back to recover my balance. "Christ's bones, you're quick today," I mutter, adjusting my grip. "And you're slow," he replies without malice. "Your mind wanders to tomorrow's contest." He's right, damn him. Always right. I force away thoughts of the tournament, of Sir Elaine, of everything except the man before me and the sword in my hand. My next parry is cleaner, more decisive. We settle into a rhythm of attack and defense, the metallic song of our blades punctuated by the scuff of boots on earth and our measured breathing. The watching squires have grown silent, absorbing every movement, every technique. Roland presses me hard, forcing me to use all my skill to keep his blade at bay. "Remember Kant," he says suddenly, referencing a battle 5 years past where I had fought beside him. The memory flashes through me. Rain-soaked field, mud to our ankles, the desperate clash against French knights who had us outnumbered. I had used what Roland taught me that day, and lived when many did not. My body responds before my mind fully processes his words. I sidestep his thrust, let his momentum carry him forward, and tap my sword lightly against his ribs. "I'd be dead," he acknowledges with a nod of approval. We separate, circle again. Sweat now soaks my shirt, my breath coming heavier. Roland appears hardly affected, though I notice the slight tremor in his left hand that he works so hard to conceal. Your turn, he says. Attack. I advance, testing his defenses with measured strikes. High, low, thrust to the center. He turns each aside with economical movements, teaching even in defense. When I overextend on a lunge, his blade taps my shoulder. Patience, he reminds me. Let opportunity reveal itself. We continue this dance, moving across the practice yard as the sun climbs higher. The watching crowd has grown. I glimpse Sir Edmund among them now, leaning on the fence with interest. Even Lord William has appeared on the wooden balcony overlooking the yard, observing our session. My arms burn pleasantly with exertion. My legs feel solid beneath me. There's comfort in this ritual. The honest conversation of blades, the wisdom passed from master to student through action rather than words. Finally, Roland steps back, lowering his sword. Enough, he says. Save something for tomorrow. I nod, breathing deeply as I lower my own weapon. The squires break into appreciative murmurs, some attempting to mimic movements they've just witnessed. Roland approaches, his voice pitched for my ears alone. You've improved your recovery after the high parry. Good, but watch your left foot. It betrays your intentions when you prepare to thrust. Thank you, master, I reply sincerely. These small corrections may well save my life someday. Whether in tournament or in earnest battle, he clasps my shoulder briefly, a gesture worth more than effusive praise from any other man. Your father would be proud of the swordsman you've become, he says quietly, then turns to address the gathered squires, barking orders that send them scurrying back to their own practice. Thomas approaches with a cloth to wipe my face and a cup of water. The cool liquid soothes my parched throat as I drink deeply. You moved like the wind, sir, he says, eyes bright with admiration. I snort, handing back the empty cup. I moved like a man, trying not to get thrashed by an old fox. There's a difference. As I catch my breath, I notice a figure watching from the shadows of the armory doorway. Sir Elaine, his expression unreadable at this distance. He offers a slight nod of acknowledgement before disappearing inside. He was watching the whole time, Thomas whispers. Good, I reply, returning my practice sword to the rack. Let him see. No advantage in secrets when skill will decide the day. I roll my neck, feeling the pleasant fatigue in my muscles. The morning's exertion has cleared my mind, prepared my body. Whatever tomorrow brings, I have done all I can to be ready. Come, I tell Thomas as bells ring out the noon hour from the chapel tower. The day is young, and there's much yet to do before sunset. As we cross the yard toward the castle proper, young squires bow respectfully, their eyes following our path. Today, I have shown them what years of discipline can achieve. Tomorrow, God willing, I will show them what it means to put that discipline to the test. The midday sun beats down upon the tournament grounds. As I leave Thomas to tend to Thunderer, my practice armor is removed, offering brief respite before the weight of full tournament plate must be donned. Sweat cools against my skin in the gentle breeze, and I stretch my sword arm, feeling the familiar ache that follows a good practice session. I must see to something before we prepare. I tell Thomas, continue polishing the tournament armor. I'll return shortly. Thomas looks up from where he's brushing down Thunderer. The apothecary, sir, for your shoulder? I grin ruefully. No hiding anything from that boy after 7 years. No sense in giving Sir Alan any advantage beyond his youth. The walk through the castle's lower ward takes me past the bustle of tournament preparations. Servants scurry about with trays of food and pitchers of ale, while merchants hawk their wares to visitors. Children dash between the legs of adults, playing at knights with sticks for swords. A pair of minstrels practice a ballad beneath an oak tree, their melody nearly lost amid the clamor. I slip through a small archway into a quieter corridor, leaving the noise behind. The stone walls here are older, worn smooth by centuries of passing hands. Torch brackets stand empty in the daytime, But even in full sun, this passage remains cool and dim. My footsteps echo slightly as I descend a short flight of worn steps. At the bottom, a heavy wooden door stands ajar, a faint golden light spilling from within. The scent reaches me even here, a complex mixture of dried herbs, earthy roots, and the sharp tang of medicinal tinctures. I knock lightly on the doorframe, though I know he's expecting me. He always does, somehow. "Enter, Sir Robert," calls a gravelly voice from within. Your shoulder speaks loudly enough that I heard it coming down the steps. I push the door open fully, ducking my head slightly to enter the low-ceilinged chamber. After the relative darkness of the corridor, the apothecary's quarters seem almost bright, illuminated by several oil lamps and a small fire burning in a stone hearth. "Master Hugh," I greet him with genuine respect. The castle's apothecary is a hunched figure, his hair a wild tangle of white that seems to merge with his equally untamed beard. But his hands are steady as a maiden's heart, and his eyes miss nothing. Those eyes turn to me now, sharp and knowing beneath bushy brows. "Tournament day again," he says, gesturing for me to sit on a three-legged stool near his workbench. "And you once more tempting fate and testing my remedies." I ease myself onto the stool, glancing around at the familiar surroundings. The chamber is a wonder of organized chaos. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the low ceiling beams, lavender, sage, rosemary, thyme, and dozens more I cannot name. Shelves line the walls crowded with clay pots, glass vials, wooden boxes, and leather pouches. A large table dominates the center, its surface covered with mortars and pestles, small scales, knives, and bowls containing powders and liquids in various stages of preparation. "Your remedies have yet to fail me," I reply, rolling my shoulder demonstratively, "though I confess the years make your work increasingly necessary." Master Hugh snorts as he moves to a shelf, his fingers dancing over vials and jars with unerring precision. "The years," he says, "not the folly of men crashing into each other with sticks for the amusement of lords and ladies." I laugh, wincing slightly as my shoulder protests. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather stupid." "Because it is," he says matter-of-factly, selecting a small clay pot sealed with wax. "And yet, here we are again." There's no real censure in his voice, just the familiar banter we've developed over years of patching me up after tournaments and battles alike. He returns to his workbench and pries open the pot, releasing a pungent aroma that makes my nose twitch. "Stripped to the waist," he commands, mixing the salve with something from another jar. I comply, unlacing my tunic and pulling it carefully over my head. The cool air raises goose flesh on my torso, marked here and there with the scars of my profession, a puckered line where a Scotsman's axe found a gap in my mail, the star-shaped reminder of an arrow that pierced my side at Creasy, and countless smaller marks, each with its own tale. Master Hugh approaches with his mixture, eyeing my shoulder critically. The joint bears no visible wound, but the skin is slightly darker there, an old bruise never quite healed. He grunts, dipping gnarled fingers into the salve. "Worse than last time. Tournament season," I explain with a shrug, then hiss as his fingers press into the tender muscle. "Hold still, you great baby," he mutters, working the salve into my skin with practiced motions. The mixture burns cold at first, then warms, seeming to seep straight through flesh to the aching joint beneath. The scent fills my nostrils, comfrey and arnica, I recognize, along with other herbs unknown to me. 3 passes today, no more, Master Hugh says as he works. Even with this, I shake my head. If I face Sir Alain, it could take more. Then pray you don't face him, the old man retorts, or that you unseat him quickly. This shoulder has taken too many impacts. One day it will not mend so easily. His words echo my own unspoken fears, but I brush them aside with a practiced ease. One day is not today. Master Hugh sighs and wipes his hands on a cloth. So says every knight, until it is indeed that day. He moves back to his shelves, rummaging among bottles. Wait for the salve to dry before dressing. I nod, sitting patiently as the mixture works its magic. Already the ache recedes, replaced by a pleasant warmth. Whatever folks might say about Master Hugh's strange ways or foreign learning, his remedies work better than prayer. Though I'd never say as much to the castle chaplain. The apothecary returns with a small vial of amber liquid. Drink this before you mount for the joust. Not before, it will make you sluggish at first, then clear-headed when you need it most. I take the vial, tucking it carefully into my belt pouch. My thanks. Save your thanks for when you're not being carried from the field, he replies dryly, then pauses, studying my face with those keen eyes that seem to see more than just flesh. You're worried about this Aquitaine knight. It's not a question, but I answer anyway. He's good, younger, hungry for reputation. Master Hugh nods sagely. The most dangerous kind. He turns away suddenly, moving to a small wooden chest in the corner of the room. After rummaging briefly, he returns with something clutched in his palm. Give me your hand, he commands. I extend my right hand palm up. Master Hugh places a small object onto it. A simple leather pouch no bigger than my thumbnail, tied with red thread and filled with something that shifts slightly when I move it. What's this? I ask, though I can guess. A charm, he says simply. Herbs and certain other elements. Carry it on your person when you ride. I raise an eyebrow, amused despite myself. I didn't take you for a believer in such things, Master Hugh. He shrugs, his face impossible to read within its nest of white hair. I believe in many things, some learned from books, some from farther lands, some from observing that which works regardless of why. He taps the pouch with one gnarled finger. The why matters less than the results, Sir Knight. I close my fingers around the small charm, oddly touched by the gesture. Master Hugh is not one to offer anything he doesn't believe has value. I'll carry it, I promise. See that you do. He moves away, beginning to clean his workspace in clear dismissal, and try not to undo my work by being more foolish than necessary. I stand, carefully pulling my tunic back over my head, mindful not to disturb the salve still working on my shoulder. The relief is substantial already. Whatever Master Hugh's methods, they're effective. One more thing, the apothecary says as I reach the door. When I turn back, his expression is uncharacteristically serious. Watch for the third pass. I'm feeling about it. A chill that has nothing to do with the cool chamber runs down my spine. Master Hugh doesn't speak of feelings often, but when he does, wise men listen. Third pass, I repeat with a nod. I'll be watchful. He waves me away, already turning back to his work, but I leave with his warning echoing in my mind. The small charm seems to pulse with warmth against my palm as I climb the steps back to the sunlit world above, where honor, duty, and perhaps destiny await on the tournament field. The bells begin to toll, signaling 1 hour before the tournament begins. Thomas will be waiting, armor ready, anticipation building. I tuck the charm securely in my pouch and quicken my steps. Whatever fate awaits in the lists today, I'll meet it as I've met every challenge, head on, lance couched and heart steady. The morning sun climbs higher as I stand at the edge of the practice lanes, watching Thomas make final adjustments to Thunderer's tack. My warhorse, a magnificent destrier with a coat like burnished copper, snorts impatiently, his breath forming small clouds in the cool morning air. He knows what's coming. 7 years, as my mount in tournament and battle, have taught him to recognize the weight of expectation that hangs in the air before combat. Steady, old friend, I murmur, approaching to run a gloved hand along his powerful neck. Thunderer turns his head, dark eyes regarding me with what I've always fancied to be understanding. We've faced worse odds than this, upstart from Aquitaine, haven't we? The practice field stretches before us, one of several lanes marked with ropes and pennants that flutter in the gentle breeze. At the far end stands the quintain, a wooden post with a rotating arm. On one end hangs a small shield, the target for my lance. On the other, a heavy sandbag, that will swing around to unseat me if I'm too slow after striking the shield. It's a humbling training device that has dumped many an overconfident knight into the dirt. Around the field, other knights prepare for their own practice runs or observe with critical eyes. Squires hurry about with lances, shields, and water skins. The air carries the mingled scents of trampled grass, horse sweat, and the distinctive metallic tang of armor warming in the sun. Thomas approaches, carrying my practice lance, 12 feet of solid ash, slightly lighter than the tournament lance I'll use later, but perfect for warming my arm and eye. His girth is secure, sir, Thomas reports, patting Thunderer's flank, and I've checked the saddle twice. No surprises today. Good lad. I take the lance, feeling its familiar weight and balance. My shoulder twinges slightly, a reminder of 38 winters and countless impacts. I roll the joint carefully, willing the stiffness away. No time for old injuries today, I mutter to myself. With practiced movements that have become second nature over decades, I mount Thunderer, settling into the high-backed jousting saddle that will help keep me secure upon impact. The armor I wear is lighter than full tournament gear, breastplate, pauldrons, and a simple helm that leaves my face exposed. Even this partial armor weighs heavily, and sweat already begins to gather at my temples and lower back. Thomas hands me my shield, which I secure to my left arm. "Remember Sir Edmund's advice about Sir Elaine," he says quietly. The left shoulder thrust after the pass. I nod, appreciating the reminder. Keep your eyes sharp when he rides. I want to confirm it myself before we meet in the lists. From across the field, Sir Edmund himself raises a hand in greeting before turning back to instruct his own squire. Despite his earlier jesting, we both know that information shared between rivals can make the difference between victory and a painful defeat. Or worse, I settle the lance in my grip, adjusting my seat as Thunderer shifts beneath me, eager to run. "Patience," I tell him, though my own heart begins to beat faster with anticipation. Taking a deep breath, I lower my visor and squeeze my knees gently against Thunderer's sides. He responds instantly, moving from standstill to trot with fluid grace that belies his enormous strength. I guide him to the starting position, feeling the familiar transformation as my body and mind prepare for the joust. The world narrows to the lane before me, the quintain at its end becoming the focus of my entire being. I raise my lance in salute to the imaginary opponent, then couch it securely against my right side, its butt tucked tight beneath my armpit. The tip wavers slightly until I steady it, aiming at the shield target ahead. "Ready yourself," I call to Thomas, who stands safely to the side, waiting to reset the quintain. Another breath, deep and centering, and then I press my heels into Thunderer's flanks. The command is barely needed. He surges forward like an arrow released from a bow. The thunder of hooves fills my ears as the world blurs at the edges of my vision. Wind rushes past my helm, and the ground seems to flow beneath us like a river. There is nothing in creation like this feeling, this perfect unity of man, beast, and purpose hurtling toward a single point in space. The quintain grows larger, rushing toward me at frightening speed. I adjust my lance, minute movements guided by years of muscle memory rather than conscious thought. My breathing slows despite our pace, time seeming to stretch as I focus absolutely on the small shield target. 3 lengths away, 2, 1, impact. The lance strikes true, dead center on the shield with a satisfying crack that vibrates up my arm. Instantly, I drive my spurs into Thunderer's flanks, urging him to maintain speed as the quintain's arm spins wildly, the sandbag whipping around where my back had been moments before. "Well struck, Sir Robert," calls one of the younger knights watching from the sidelines. I circle back, my blood singing with the small victory. Thomas hurries to reset the quintain, his face bright with enthusiasm. Perfect strike, sir. Right in the center. I lift my visor, grinning despite myself. The rush of a clean hit never fades, even after all these years. The balance on this lance is good. Mark it for use in the next practice round. For the next hour, I run the lane again and again, each time focusing on a different aspect of the joust. One run for accuracy, another for speed, a third for the follow-through after impact. Sweat runs freely down my back and chest, soaking the padded gambeson beneath my armor. My right arm begins to ache with the familiar burn of exertion, but I push through, knowing that fatigue in practice builds endurance for the tournament. After a particularly hard strike that nearly cracks the practice lance, I call for a brief rest. Thomas brings watered wine, which I drink gratefully, the tart coolness washing away the dust of the practice field. Sir Elaine was watching, Thomas murmurs, taking back the empty cup. From beyond the north barrier, left before you completed your last run. I nod, unsurprised. Good, let him watch. Better that than knowing nothing of each other before we meet. The sun stands nearly at its zenith now. Around us, other knights begin to conclude their practice, moving toward the tents where they'll rest before the afternoon's tournament. Servants have begun to appear at the edges of the field, carrying baskets of food and drink for the midday meal. I pat Thunderer's neck, feeling the sweat-dampened coat beneath my glove. One more run, I tell Thomas, then we'll see to his rest and feeding before the real work begins. Thomas nods and jogs back to the quintain, adjusting it slightly for the final pass. I lower my visor once more, the familiar darkness a comfort rather than a constraint. Thunderer, sensing this will be the last run for now, tosses his head eagerly. Steady, I murmur. Make it count, old friend. We take position at the end of the lane. I settle the lance, feeling the weight of it as an extension of my arm, my will. Everything else falls away. The watching knights, the fluttering banners, the distant sounds of the gathering tournament crowd. There is only the target, the lane, and the perfect moment waiting to be claimed. I send Thunderer forward with a gentle press of my heels. No voice command needed. His powerful haunches bunch and release, driving us down the lane with thunderous force. The quintain rushes toward us, and I time my breathing to the rhythm of hoofbeats. The lance strikes with a resounding crack, perfectly centered. I urge Thunderer past as the sandbag whirls harmlessly behind us, completing a perfect run that feels like poetry written in motion and impact. Circling back, I raise my visor to the cheers of several squires and younger knights who have paused their own practice to watch. Even Sir Edmund nods appreciatively from where he stands with his squire. A fine omen for the tournament, he calls. I smile and raise my lance in acknowledgement, though we both know that omens count for little against skill, courage, and sometimes simple luck. Still, it feels good to end the practice on such a note. A reminder to myself and any watching that despite the gray in my beard, Sir Robert is no easy mark in the lists. As I dismount, letting Thomas take Thunderer for cooling and watering, I look toward the tournament field where servants and officials make final preparations for the afternoon's contests. Soon the stands will fill with cheering nobles and common folk alike. Soon the herald will call names, and we knights will answer with steel and courage. My muscles ache pleasantly from the morning's exertion, but my mind feels sharp, ready. I turn toward my tent, where I'll rest briefly before donning full tournament armor. The real test awaits, and all this, the practice, the preparation, the lifetime of training, comes down to those few thundering moments in the jousting lane. The heat hits me like a wall as I duck through the low doorway of Master Giles's forge. After the cool spring air outside, stepping into the smithy feels like walking into the very mouth of hell itself, or at least purgatory. Sweat springs to my brow almost immediately, and I feel a trickle run down my back beneath my tunic. Master Giles? I call out, my voice nearly lost in the rhythmic clanging of hammer on anvil. The blacksmith looks up from his work, his massive forearms glistening with sweat. face ruddy in the glow of the forge. He sets down his hammer and wipes his hands on his leather apron, leaving dark smudges across the already stained material. "Sir Robert," he acknowledges with a nod that borders on a bow but doesn't quite commit to it. Master Giles is one of the few men in the castle who treats knights with respect rather than deference. His skill with metal earns him that right. A good blacksmith is worth more than gold in times of war and tournament alike. "I've come about my dagger," I say, moving deeper into the cramped space, "and to check the repairs on my helm." He gestures toward a workbench tucked against the far wall. "Just putting the final edge on your blade. Come see if it meets your approval." The forge dominates the center of the room, a stone hearth glowing with coals that pulse between orange and white hot at the heart. A massive bellows hangs to one side, and Giles's apprentice, a gangly boy of perhaps 14 summers, works it steadily, his face streaked with soot and concentration. With each compression, the coals flare brighter, and a shower of sparks spirals upward, like a swarm of fireflies seeking escape through the smoke hole in the roof. The air tastes metallic, tinged with the sharp bite of hot iron, charcoal, and the tang of quenching oil. Beneath those dominant scents lies the earthier smell of leather, sweat, and the distinctive aroma of the special resins Giles adds to his forge to achieve particular colors in his metal. My boots crunch on the gritty floor, a mixture of dirt, charcoal dust, and tiny metal filings that will eventually be swept up and reused. I make my way to the workbench, careful not to touch anything. Years ago, I learned that lesson the hard way. A freshly forged knife pommel left a burn on my palm shaped like a perfect circle. Couldn't grip a sword properly for a week. Master Giles follows, picking up my dagger from among several tools scattered across the wooden surface. The blade gleams with fresh sharpening, catching the red light of the forge and transforming it into dangerous orange highlights along its edge. "Balance is true," he says, flipping the dagger and catching it by the blade between thumb and forefinger, offering the hilt to me, "and the new grip should serve better than the old. Oak wrapped in leather, with copper wire for binding, won't slip in your hand, even with blood or rain." I take the weapon, immediately appreciating its perfect weight. The grip feels right against my palm, not too rough to blister, not too smooth to slip. I test the edge with my thumb, just the lightest touch. "Christ's teeth," I mutter with appreciation as the blade nearly draws blood without pressure. Sharp enough to shave a ghost. Giles's mouth twitches in what passes for his smile. "Try it proper," he suggests, nodding toward a block of oak on the bench. I bring the dagger down against the wood, and it sinks a finger's depth with minimal effort. Pulling it free, I examine the clean cut. "Beautiful work, Master Giles, as always. Been forging for your family since your father first earned his spurs," he reminds me, taking the dagger back to wipe it clean of sap with an oiled cloth. "Made his first tourney sword when I was barely older than Watt here." He nods toward his apprentice, who continues working the bellows, though his curious eyes watch our exchange. While Giles sheathes the dagger, I let my gaze wander around the forge. Every available space is hung with tools, hammers of various sizes, tongs, punches, and implements I couldn't name if my life depended on it. Partially completed work rests on shelves and hooks, horseshoes, nails, hinges, and more specialized items for the tournament. In the corner stands a suit of armor in progress, the breastplate gleaming with fresh polish while the greaves remain dull with hammer marks still visible. "And my helm?" I ask, looking back to Giles. "Here." He moves to another bench and lifts a familiar piece of armor. My tournament helm, its visor now moving smoothly on repaired hinges. "Fix that catch that gave you trouble at Winchester. Won't jam on you again, on my honor." I take the helm, turning it in my hands, running my fingers over the smooth metal. The weight is reassuring, solid protection for the dangerous sport of jousting, where a broken neck is always just one bad fall away. I test the visor, raising and lowering it several times. The motion is indeed smooth, with none of the grinding that had concerned me before. "You've outdone yourself," I say, genuinely impressed. "What do I owe you?" Giles waves a dismissive hand. "Lord William has settled your account for the tournament repairs, said it was the least he could do for his champion." There's a hint of something in his voice, perhaps pride that his lord values good craftsmanship, perhaps satisfaction that his work will be displayed in the tournament. A sudden gust of cooler air announces someone entering the forge. I turn to see Thomas hurrying in, carefully carrying my shield. "Sir Robert," he says, slightly out of breath, "Master Hugh has finished the painting. I thought you'd want to see it before the herald's call." He turns the shield toward me, and I can't help the small intake of breath. The wooden surface, reinforced with metal bands, now bears my coat of arms freshly painted in vibrant colors, the silver falcon on azure blue background, with the red bend sinister that marks my family's line. The paint gleams with fresh varnish, the colors standing out bold and clear against the polished metal rim. "Perfect timing," I say, taking the shield from him. "We were just finishing here." Master Giles examines the paintwork with a critical eye. "Hugh's got a steady hand, I'll give him that. Colors will be visible clear across the field. That's the idea," I reply, running my fingers over the raised design. "A knight whose colors can't be seen might as well be nameless." I gather my dagger and helm, tucking the first into my belt and handing the second to Thomas. The weight of the shield on my arm feels right, like greeting an old friend. Together these pieces of metal and wood are more than mere objects. They are extensions of myself, the physical embodiments of my honor and reputation. "The final call will sound soon," Thomas says, glancing toward the door. I nod and turn back to Master Giles. "My thanks for your skill as always." The blacksmith gives another of his almost bows. "Fight well, Sir Robert. I've money wagered on you against that Aquitaine peacock." This surprises a laugh from me. "I'll do my best not to cost you your silver then." As Thomas and I make to leave, Giles calls after me. "Sir Robert, one more thing." He reaches beneath his workbench and produces a small object, which he tosses to me. I catch it reflexively. It's a small amulet, a steel medallion no bigger than a coin, stamped with the image of Saint Michael, patron of warriors. The metal is still warm from the forge. "For luck," Giles says gruffly. "Wear it under your armor." I close my fingers around the medallion, touched by the unexpected gesture. "I will. My thanks." We step back into the relative cool of the courtyard, the sounds of the forge fading behind us. The tournament field awaits, with its challenges and glories. My weapons are sharp, my armor sound, and my colors bright. I am as ready as a man can be to face whatever comes. "To the pavilion, Thomas," I say, tucking the medallion safely into my tunic. "It's time to arm for the lists." A page boy finds me as I'm adjusting the strapping on my vambrace, the afternoon sun slanting through the tent opening. His face is flushed from running. "Sir Robert," he pants, bowing slightly. "Lord William requests your presence. At once, if it please you." Thomas looks up from where he's polishing my tournament helm, his eyebrows raised in silent question. I give him a small shrug. I know no more than he does. "Did his lordship mention the purpose?" I ask the boy, who shakes his head. "Only that it's urgent, sir. He awaits you in his private chamber." My mind races with possibilities as I follow the page through the busy tournament grounds. Summons to Lord William's private chamber is unusual, especially on a tournament day when he normally holds court in the public viewing stands. Something significant must be afoot. We enter the castle through a side entrance, avoiding the bustle of the main courtyard. The stone walls bring immediate relief from the afternoon heat, though my gambeson is already damp with sweat beneath my tunic. Our footsteps echo down the corridor, passing servants who flatten themselves against the walls, heads bowed in deference. The page leads me up a spiral staircase to the eastern tower, where Lord William keeps his private chambers. 2 guards stand at attention outside a heavy oak door bound with iron. They nod in recognition, one rapping his knuckles against the wood before calling out, "Sir Robert, my lord as requested, enter." The voice from within is familiar but carries an unusual edge of tension. The page boy melts away as the guards swing the door open. I step into a chamber that speaks of wealth and power without ostentation. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes and ancient battles line the walls, their colors rich against the stone. A fire burns low in the hearth despite the warm day, casting dancing shadows across the room. Lord William stands by a narrow window, looking out over his lands. He turns as the door closes behind me, his face impossible to read in the half-light. "Sir Robert, thank you for coming so promptly." He gestures toward a chair. "Please sit wine." "Thank you, my lord." I settle into the offered seat, a beautifully carved thing with cushions of red velvet, not made for a man in fighting clothes, but comfortable nonetheless. Lord William pours dark red wine into 2 silver goblets from a decanter on a side table. The liquid catches the light from the candles, gleaming like blood. He hands me one before taking the seat opposite mine, the carved table between us. "You performed well in practice this morning," he says, watching me over the rim of his goblet. "You were observing, my lord?" I ask, surprised. Lord William rarely attends the practice fields. He smiles slightly. "I have eyes everywhere, Sir Robert, especially before a tournament of this importance." I sip the wine, rich and full-bodied, likely from French vineyards, far better than what's served in the Great Hall. Whatever this meeting concerns, it merits the good vintage. "And what makes this tournament so important?" I ask carefully. "Beyond the usual honor and glory, of course." Lord William leans back, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the arm of his chair. The ruby ring he wears, his father's before him, catches the firelight with each movement. "What do you know of Lord Geoffrey's recent activities?" I consider my words carefully. "Court politics is a battlefield more treacherous than any I've faced with sword or lance." "Only rumors, my lord. Some say he's been meeting with envoys from the north. Others claim he strengthened his castle fortifications beyond what peace requires." "Both true." Lord William nods. "And there's more. My sources tell me he's been courting favor with the king's brother, the Duke of Lancaster." I raise my eyebrows. The Duke's ambitions are well known, as is his strained relationship with the crown. "The same." Lord William rises, moving to a chest nestled against the wall. He unlocks it with a key from his belt and removes a rolled parchment. "This tournament is more than sport, Sir Robert. It's a demonstration of strength, of allegiances." He unfurls the parchment on the table between us, a map of the region, showing our lands and Lord Geoffrey's neighboring territory. Small markers indicate villages, forests, and a blue line represents the river that forms our mutual border. "The king has granted me authority to oversee this entire region," Lord William continues, his finger tracing a circle that encompasses both our lands and Lord Geoffrey's. "He does not trust Geoffrey's loyalty, and Geoffrey knows this." I ask, understanding beginning to dawn. "He suspects. That's why he brought Sir Elaine to this tournament." The man's reputation sends a message. I take another sip of wine, feeling its warmth spread through my chest. "And what message would you have me send in return, my lord?" Lord William's eyes meet mine directly. There's a hardness there I've seen only rarely, usually before battle. "Defeat him, decisively. Show Geoffrey and everyone watching that my knights, my forces, are not to be trifled with." The weight of responsibility settles on my shoulders, heavier than any armor. I'm no longer just fighting for personal glory or the honor of my lord. I'm a piece in a larger game of power. "And if I succeed?" I ask, setting down my goblet. Lord William smiles, though the expression doesn't reach his eyes. "Win today's joust, and you shall have more than glory, Sir Robert." He moves to a small table near the window, lifting a cloth to reveal what lies beneath. I rise to see better, my breath catching slightly. The northern lands, Lord William says, pointing to a section of the map I hadn't noticed before. The old Wallace holding 40 hides of good land, a small manor house, and the loyalty of the farmers there. I've held them in stewardship since old Sir Wallace died without heir. They could be yours. My heart beats faster at the thought. Land of my own, a manor, security for my later years when my arm grows too weak to wield sword or lance. Every knight's dream. There will be responsibilities, of course, he continues. You would owe me additional service, men-at-arms from your lands when needed, but you will be more than a household knight. You will be a landed vassal. The fire pops loudly in the hearth, sending a shower of sparks against the stones. Outside, a trumpet sounds in the distance, the tournament heralds beginning their announcements. Time grows short. Lord William says, rolling the map once more. The first rounds will begin soon. I stand straighter, my mind still reeling from the offer, but my purpose suddenly crystal clear. I understand what's required, my lord. I won't disappoint. Lord William approaches, placing a hand on my shoulder. Up close, I can see the lines of worry etched around his eyes, usually hidden by his confident demeanor. I know you won't. You've served me faithfully for many years, but Sir Alain is dangerous, Robert. Don't underestimate him because of his youth. I never underestimate any opponent. My lord replied, touched by his concern. He nods, seeming satisfied. One more thing. Geoffrey may approach you himself. He's been known to make offers to skilled knights before tournaments. My back stiffens at the implied question. My loyalty is not for sale, my lord. Lord William's face relaxes slightly. I never doubted it, but it's good to hear nonetheless. He gestures to the door. Go now, prepare yourself. And Robert, I pause at the threshold, looking back. Be careful. This is about more than a joust. The guards close the door behind me as I step into the corridor, my mind whirling with all I've learned. The page appears again, ready to lead me back, but I barely notice him. Land of my own, a future beyond the battlefield. All I need do is defeat one knight, albeit a formidable one, in a tournament where I've claimed victory dozens of times before. As we descend the spiral staircase, the sounds of the tournament grow louder. Trumpets, cheers, the voices of heralds announcing the first competitors. A different kind of battle awaits me there. One with rules and boundaries, yes, but no less significant for it. Thomas will be wondering where I am. My armor needs final adjustments. Thunderer must be prepared. But with each step back toward the tournament grounds, my resolve strengthens. I will win, not just for glory, not just for land, but because my lord, my friend, has asked it of me. And in this world of shifting loyalties and whispered conspiracies, that simple truth is something I can grasp as firmly as sword or life. The afternoon sun bathes the fairgrounds in golden light as I make my way through the crowd, having shed my armor for a brief respite before the next round of jousting. Thomas walks half a step behind me, occasionally clearing a path when the throng grows too dense. My body aches pleasantly from the morning's exertions. 2 victories already, though the true tests await tomorrow, when I'll face Sir Alain and the other undefeated knights. Wine, good sir, spiced with cinnamon from the Holy Land itself. A merchant calls from his stall, recognizing my fine tunic with its embroidered crest. I shake my head with a smile, but press a small silver coin into his weathered palm nonetheless. For your hospitality, I tell him, enjoying the surprised delight that spreads across his face. God bless you, Sir Knight. May your lance strike true tomorrow. He offers a goblet despite my refusal, and I accept it with a nod, taking a small sip of the sweet, warming liquid. The spices dance across my tongue, cinnamon indeed, but also cloves, and something more exotic I cannot name. The heat of it spreads through my chest, a pleasant counterpoint to the cool autumn air. All around me, the tournament grounds pulse with life. Colorful tents and pavilions create a patchwork village that sprawls beyond the castle walls. Banners snap in the breeze, displaying the arms of noble houses from across 3 counties. The air carries a medley of scents: roasting meats, fresh bread, sweet pastries, horse dung, sweat, leather, and the green smell of trampled grass. Make way for Lord Geoffrey's party. A herald calls, and the crowd parts as a group of richly dressed nobles passes by. Lord Geoffrey himself nods in acknowledgement as he spots me, a calculating look in his eyes. He has wagered heavily on Sir Elaine, I've heard. Enjoying the festivities, Sir Robert? He asks, pausing briefly. Indeed, my lord. A fine gathering. A credit to Lord William's hospitality. Geoffrey's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Let us hope tomorrow's contests prove enlightening regarding the true measure of a knight. Truth is always found in the lists, my lord, I reply evenly. Keep eyes, judgment, and a steady hand. He moves on with a non-committal hum, his entourage following like a gaudy, perfumed wave through the more humbly dressed crowd. Pompous arse, I mutter once he's safely beyond earshot, making Thomas stifle a laugh. We continue our wandering, pausing at stalls that catch my interest. A leather worker displays saddles of exceptional quality, tooled with intricate patterns of leaves and beasts. An armorer hammers at a breastplate, the rhythmic clanging adding to the music of the fair. I finger the edge of a finely crafted dagger, testing its balance. Good steel, that. The smith tells me proudly. Made in the northern style, cold forged for strength. Solid craftsmanship, I agree, returning it to its display. I'll remember your stall when I need new spurs. Children dart between the adults, playing at knights and dragons with wooden swords and shields. A boy of perhaps 7 summers crashes accidentally into my legs, looking up with sudden terror as he realizes he's collided with an actual knight. Sorry, sir, he stammers, clutching his wooden sword. I crouch down to his level, ignoring the protest in my knee. A knight must always be aware of his surroundings in battle. I tell him seriously, but you have a good grip on your weapon. What's your name, young warrior? William, sir, like the Lord. His chest puffs out slightly. Well, William, perhaps I'll see you in the lists in 10 years' time, eh? I ruffle his hair, and he beams before racing off to rejoin his friends, already shouting of his encounter with a real tournament champion. Thomas grins beside me. You've made a lifelong admirer there, sir. God help him if he truly aspires to this life. I reply, straightening with a wince. My joints remind me daily that glory comes at a price. We pass a group of minstrels playing beneath an ancient oak tree that predates even the castle. A young woman with hair like spun gold strums a lute, while her companion, an older man with a patch over one eye, plays a pipe. Their song catches my ear, a familiar ballad about Sir Gawain and his legendary deed. A small crowd has gathered to listen, tossing coins into a hat when particularly pleasing verses are sung. I pause at the edge of the gathering, letting the music wash over me. The girl's voice is clear as a mountain stream, rising and falling with practiced skill. When the song ends, the one-eyed man spots me and nudges his companion. She turns, eyes widening slightly. Sir Robert of Thornfield, is it not? The man calls, twice champion at King Edward's tourney. I nod, somewhat surprised to be recognized. Some years ago now. Would you honor us with a request, sir? Perhaps a tale of your own deeds for inspiration. The small crowd turns, murmurs of recognition spreading as they realize a tournament competitor stands among them. I feel a flush creeping up my neck at the unexpected attention. I'm afraid my deeds are better suited to the lists than to song. I demur, but perhaps something of Roland in the rear guard at Roncesvalles, a fitting reminder of courage before tomorrow's contests. The girl smiles and begins to tune her lute. An excellent choice, Sir Knight. As she begins to play, an older woman approaches with a wreath of late-blooming wildflowers. For luck tomorrow, sir, she says, pressing it into my hands. My grandson serves in Lord William's guard. He speaks highly of your kindness to the common soldiers. Tie. I thank her, oddly touched by the simple gesture. Thomas takes the wreath with a promise to place it reverently in my tent. Such small moments of connection with the people. These are the truest rewards of knighthood, more lasting than tournament purses or even the approval of lords. The song builds to its tragic climax. Brave Roland, surrounded but defiant, sounding his horn too late. I've always found it a strangely comforting tale. Even the greatest knights face defeat eventually. What matters is how we meet it. Tie. As the final notes fade, a man selling meat pies does brisk business among the dispersing crowd. The aroma reminds me I haven't eaten since morning, and I purchased two, handing one to Thomas. Sir Edmund says Sir Alain refused a challenge this afternoon. Thomas says between bites, claimed he's saving his strength for tomorrow's worthy opponents. I snort. Diplomatic way of avoiding risks before the final day. Smart, if not particularly gallant. We continue our circuit of the grounds as the sun begins its descent toward the horizon. The quality of light changes, turning the world golden amber. Torches are being lit around the perimeter, and the atmosphere shifts subtly as day gives way to evening revelry. Near the edge of the fairgrounds, a fortune teller has set up her tent, adorned with strange symbols and bundles of dried herbs. She sits on a stool outside, her face weathered by years and elements, dark eyes sharp as she watches passers-by. Your future holds great promise, Sir Knight, she calls as we approach. Or perhaps great peril. Would you know which awaits you tomorrow? I smile but shake my head. The future reveals itself in its own time, good woman. She laughs, a surprisingly rich sound from such a frail-looking figure. Wisdom as well as courage, rare qualities indeed. She tosses something into her small brazier, causing the flames to flare briefly blue-green. May your sight be clear when the moment of truth arrives. The cryptic blessing follows me as we turn back toward the castle, where evening festivities will soon begin. A feast for the competitors and entertainment for lord and commoner alike. The weight of tomorrow's contest settles on my shoulders, not unwelcome but impossible to ignore. As we walk, the Angelus bell begins to toll from the castle's chapel, calling the faithful to evening prayer. I pause, making the sign of the cross as I've done since childhood. Around me, others do the same. A momentary island of stillness in the sea of movement. Time to return, I murmur to Thomas as the final toll fades. Tomorrow comes early, and tonight's feast will run late. The castle looms ahead, its stone walls catching the last direct light of day, windows beginning to glow with candlelight from within. Beyond it, the tournament field waits in shadow, patient as fate itself, ready for tomorrow's glories and defeats. My name may yet be added to the bard's verses, or I may join the countless forgotten knights, whose courage was no match for fortune's whims. Either way, I will meet tomorrow's challenge as I have met all others, with a steady hand, a brave heart, and faith that God's will reveals itself in each moment of our brief lives.
You need not accompany me, Thomas, I say, tightening thunderous girth strap myself. Take the evening. Find that pretty scullery maid who kept watching you at midday. My squire's face flushes pink. Sir, I should prepare your armor for tomorrow's. The armor will wait. I place a hand on his shoulder. I need solitude more than polished steel tonight. The day's events weigh heavily upon me. 3 victories in the lists, yet each harder won than the last. My body aches in a dozen places, and my mind feels cluttered with strategies, concerns, and the constant awareness of tomorrow's challenges. Sir Alain remains undefeated as well. Our meeting seems inevitable now. Thomas hesitates, then nods. As you wish. But you'll take the horn? I smile at his concern. Yes, mother hen, I'll take the horn. The small hunting horn hangs from my saddle, a concession to prudence. A knight alone could meet bandits, break a leg, or worse. 3 clear notes would carry to the castle walls. The guards at the western gate, straighten as I approach, thunderous hooves clattering on the cobblestones. The portcullis has not yet been lowered for the night. "Evening ride, Sir Robert?" asks the captain, a grizzled veteran named Osric, who served with me in the northern campaigns. "Just seeking quiet, Osric." He nods with understanding. "Fair enough. The hills are peaceful this evening. Stay within sight of the beacon fires, eh?" "I've no desire to test my blade tonight," I assure him. With a gesture to his men, Osric lets me pass. The drawbridge creaks beneath thunderous weight, and then we're beyond the castle walls, the sounds of revelry and preparation fading behind us. I inhale deeply, tasting freedom in the cooling evening air. The sun hangs low, transforming the western sky into a canvas of gold, crimson, and deepening blue. Long shadows stretch across the rutted road that winds through fields recently harvested, stubble catching the amber light like countless tiny spears. Thunderous seems to share my relief at escaping the castle's confines. His ears prick forward, and his stride lengthens as we leave the road for a path that climbs gently into the rolling hills beyond the cultivated lands. I loosen my grip on the reins, trusting him to find secure footing. We understand each other well, this great beast and I, partners in war and tournament, each knowing the other's rhythms and needs. "Go on then," I murmur, patting his neck. "Show me you've more energy than your aging master." He needs no further encouragement, breaking into a canter that eats up the ground with fluid grace. The wind tugs at my cloak and rushes past my ears, carrying away thoughts of tomorrow's combat, of politics and rivalries, of everything except this moment of motion and freedom. We crest a hill, and I gently rein Thunderer to a halt. Below us stretches a valley bathed in golden light, a small stream cutting through it like a ribbon of fire where it catches the setting sun. A stand of ancient oaks, their leaves beginning to turn with autumn's approach, casts long shadows across a meadow where, yes, there they are, a herd of deer grazes peacefully. I dismount slowly, my body protesting with various aches. "Christ's bones," I mutter, stretching my back. "I'm getting too old for this nonsense." Thunderer snorts as if in disagreement, nuzzling my shoulder. I scratch behind his ears, his favorite spot. "Easy for you to say. You don't take the hits." For a time, I simply stand there, one hand resting on Thunderer's warm neck, watching the deer. A stag with an impressive rack of antlers lifts his head occasionally, scanning for danger, but they haven't caught our scent on the evening breeze. There must be 20 animals in the herd. Good hunting, though that's not my purpose today. The shadows lengthen as the sun sinks lower. I lead Thunderer to a flat stone and use it to mount again, a concession to my battered body that I'd never allow myself where others might see. We continue along the ridgeline at a walk, following a path worn by shepherds and their flocks during summer grazing. The golden light paints everything in warm hues, transforming the ordinary countryside into something from a troubadour's tale. Even the rocks and thistles seem beautiful in this light. I breathe deeply, filling my lungs with air scented by wild thyme and sun-warmed earth. How different this peaceful scene from tomorrow's contest. There will be noise and dust, the crash of lances, the roar of the crowd hungry for spectacle. Here there is only the rhythmic sound of Thunderer's hoofs, the creak of leather, the distant call of a nightjar beginning its evening hunt. We come to a small clearing, where a fallen tree provides a natural seat. I dismount again, more carefully this time, and loosen Thunderer's girth to let him breathe easy. He immediately lowers his head to crop at the sweet grass while I settle on the log, wincing as a particularly tender bruise on my thigh makes itself known. Getting soft, I tell myself, though I know it's not true. 3 victories today against skilled opponents prove otherwise. Still, recovery comes slower with each passing year. Wounds that once healed in days now linger for weeks. Gray hairs multiply like rabbits in springtime. I pull off my riding gloves and rub my face with calloused hands, feeling the rough stubble that will need a razor's attention before tomorrow's appearance. The sunset has deepened now, the sky directly above fading to indigo while the western horizon still burns with defiant fire. From this vantage, I can see the castle in the distance, its towers catching the last light. Smoke rises from countless cook fires in the surrounding encampment, where merchants, travelers, and commoners gather for the tournament. Tiny figures move about like ants, lives intersecting in ways I'll never know. How strange, this life of a knight. To be both central and apart, to be cheered by crowds and yet ultimately alone in the decisive moment, to live by a code that grows more antiquated with each passing year as the world changes around us. A distant bell tolls from the castle, the signal that the gates will close in 1 hour. Not a summons yet, but a warning. I close my eyes for a moment, letting the peacefulness of the hillside wash over me. No demands here. No expectations, just the cooling air against my skin, the scent of crushed grass beneath my boots, the subtle sounds of the countryside preparing for night. Thunder's soft nickering pulls me from my reverie. He's lifted his head, ears pricked toward the valley below. Following his gaze, I spot movement. The deer herd, alarmed by some unseen presence, bounds across the meadow in perfect unison, white tails flashing in the fading light. Time to head back, old friend, I murmur, rising from my improvised seat. My joints protest the movement, but I feel somehow lightened, as though I've set down a burden I didn't realize I was carrying. I tighten his girth and mount once more, turning him toward the castle. We'll take our time returning, savoring these last moments of solitude before rejoining the bustling humanity within those walls. Tomorrow will bring what it brings, victory or defeat, glory or pain. Tonight there is just this, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats, the gathering stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky, and the comforting certainty that dawn will come again regardless of any man's triumphs or failures. As we descend toward the road, an owl glides silently from a nearby tree, its wings pale against the deepening blue of evening. I watch its hunting flight and smile to myself. Perhaps that's what awaits tomorrow, the swift, decisive strike, the moment of perfect clarity when all practice and preparation converge into a single action. The castle grows larger as we approach, torches now visible along its walls like earthbound stars. The sounds of life reach out to meet us, snatches of song, laughter, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer making final repairs to someone's armor. I straighten in the saddle, already feeling the mantle of Sir Robert settling back onto my shoulders. The peaceful rider giving way once more to the tournament champion, the Lord's sworn sword, the knight with a reputation to uphold. But something of the hillside's peace remains with me as we pass through the gates, a small kernel of quiet strength hidden beneath the weight of expectation and duty. Tomorrow's contest seems less daunting now, reduced to its proper size against the vastness of the darkening sky and the eternal cycle of days.
The great hall blazes with light and warmth, a welcome change from the chill that had settled into my bones during the afternoon's contests. 100 torches line the stone walls, their flames dancing to create shifting shadows across the ancient tapestries. The enormous hearth at the far end crackles with a fire large enough to roast an ox, casting a golden glow across the assembled nobility. I shift slightly in my seat, trying to find a comfortable position. My body aches pleasantly from the day's exertions. 5 jousts, 3 victories, and only 1 fall that left my shoulder throbbing. Still, I've known worse days, much worse. More wine, Sir Robert? A serving girl with flushed cheeks leans close, pitcher poised above my goblet. God's mercy, yes, I reply with a grateful smile, though water it generously. Tomorrow promises more challenges. The feast has reached that perfect moment, when hunger has been satisfied, but true revelry has yet to begin. Trenchers of dark bread lie before us, soaked with the juices of roasted meats and gravies. The tables groan under the weight of Lord William's hospitality. Enormous platters of roast boar garnished with apples, haunches of venison, meat pies steaming with savory aromas, and dozens of smaller dishes featuring the best of the season's harvest. I tear a piece from a warm loaf, dipping it into a dish of honey and herbs. The sweetness explodes across my tongue, a perfect counterpoint to the rich meats I've been enjoying. Nearby, Sir Edmund gestures animatedly, recounting his victory over a knight from Cornwall to an appreciative audience of younger men. And then the fool tried to unseat me with a lance grip I haven't seen since King Henry's day. He roars, slapping the table for emphasis. Wine sloshes from several cups, adding to the stains already marring the linen cloth. I catch his eye and raise my goblet in salute. We both know his victory today was hard-won against a worthy opponent, but such is the privilege of the victor to shape the tale as he wishes. Tomorrow, I might be the one embellishing my own triumphs, God willing. The musicians in the gallery above strike up a livelier tune, and several of the younger ladies and gentlemen move to the cleared space at the center of the hall. Their dancing is elegant but reserved. The true revelry will come later, when the highest nobility have retired, and the wine flows more freely among those who remain. Thomas appears behind me, leaning close to speak near my ear. Your armor is polished and ready for tomorrow, sir. I've checked every strap and buckle twice. Good lad, I murmur, patting his arm. Now go enjoy yourself for a few hours. You've earned it. He hesitates. Sir Elaine was asking questions about Thunderer, about his training. I frowned slightly. Among the grooms. Yes, sir. Wanted to know how he responds to noise during a charge. Interesting. I file this information away. Another small piece in understanding my most dangerous opponent. Keep your ears open, but don't let him know we're watching. And Thomas, I catch his sleeve as he turns to go. Truly find some enjoyment tonight. A squire who doesn't laugh occasionally becomes a dour knight. His face brightens, and he nods before disappearing into the crowd. I watch him go, remembering my own days as a squire. The exhausting work, the desperate desire to prove myself worthy, the rare moments of celebration. Lord William rises from the high table, raising his ornate goblet. The hall gradually falls silent as attention turns to our host. My noble friends, he calls, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. Today, we witnessed valor and skill upon the field of honor. Cheers erupt, along with the pounding of cups against wood. Tomorrow brings the grand joust, where our champions will test their mettle for glory and the favor of their lords and ladies. More cheering follows. I take a long sip of wine, feeling its warmth spread through my chest. Lord William continues, praising various knights for their showing in today's preliminary contests. When he mentions my name, several voices raise in approval. I acknowledge them with a modest nod, though I can't deny the pleasure their recognition brings. As the Lord concludes his speech and returns to his seat, servants appear with a new round of delicacies, sugared fruits, spiced custards, and pastries shaped like fantastic beasts. The hall hums with renewed conversation and laughter. I'm reaching for a pastry shaped like a swan when I notice a subtle change in the atmosphere. Conversations falter, heads turn, and a path seems to clear through the crowded hall. A knight approaches, tall, broad-shouldered, clad not in the colorful feast attire of the other guests, but in a surcoat of deepest black over a shirt of fine mail. His dark beard is neatly trimmed, framing features that might be called handsome, were they not set in such severe lines. Sir Elaine moves with deliberate purpose, his boots striking the stone floor with measured steps. He passes tables of suddenly silent revelers, his gaze fixed ahead. Fixed, I realize with a start on me. The hairs rise on the back of my neck. Something in his approach speaks of more than the usual tournament rivalry. This feels personal, though I'm certain we've never met before this gathering. Sir Elaine stops directly before me,
close enough that I can smell the subtle scent of cloves and leather that clings to him. The hall has grown so quiet that the crackling of the hearth fire seems thunderous in comparison. "Sir Robert," he says, his voice carrying in the silence, "your reputation does you credit. 3 victories today, most impressive for a knight of your experience." The slight pause before the last word isn't lost on me. I rise slowly to my feet, unwilling to remain seated while he towers above. My aching muscles protest, but I ignore them. "You honor me with your notice, Sir Elaine," I reply evenly, "though I believe you achieved 4 victories yourself. My congratulations." He inclines his head in acknowledgement, then with deliberate movements, he removes a glove and reaches for an untouched goblet from the table. A servant hurries forward to fill it with wine. "I have watched you closely, Sir Robert of Westmoreland," he continues, his accent growing more pronounced. "They say you were once the finest lance in 3 counties. Once." I can't help the edge that creeps into my voice. Something like satisfaction flickers in his eyes. "Time claims us all eventually, does it not?" Around us, I sense the collective held breath of the audience this unexpected drama has attracted. From the corner of my eye, I see Sir Edmund shift forward in his seat, watchful and concerned. Sir Elaine raises his goblet. "I would make a proposal, Sir Knight, a special contest, you and I, at dawn tomorrow, before the grand joust begins." His voice carries throughout the now silent hall. 3 passes, traditional rules, the victor to claim a prize of his choosing from the tourney spoils. The challenge hangs in the air between us. This is no ordinary tournament challenge. The timing, the formality, the audience he's gathered with his theatrical approach. Whatever drives Sir Elaine, it's more than simple ambition or glory seeking. I should perhaps take counsel. Consider the political implications. Lord William's feast is not the traditional venue for such challenges. And yet, my pride bristles at his veiled references to my age, at the assumption that I would hesitate. Dawn comes early after such festivities. "Sir Elaine," I reply, reaching for my own goblet, "but I accept your challenge." A murmur runs through the hall. I raise my cup to match his gesture. 3 passes, I continue, meeting his gaze steadily. "Though I warn you, I rise even earlier these days. Age, you understand. We older knights require less sleep." A few chuckles break the tension. Sir Elaine's expression remains unchanged, though something dangerous flashes in his eyes. "To honor then," he says, "and to truth revealed in combat." "To honor," I echo. We drink together, sealing the pact. As he turns to leave, moving with the same measured steps through the parting crowd, conversations resume in urgent whispers. Thomas appears at my side, his young face tight with concern. "Sir, why would he—" "I don't know," I interrupt quietly, watching Sir Elaine's retreating back. "But we'll find out at dawn, won't we?" The feast continues around us, but now with an undercurrent of anticipation. Musicians play, dancers move, wine flows, yet every eye occasionally turns to where I sit, and then to the solitary figure of Sir Elaine at a distant table. Dawn seems suddenly very close indeed, and with it, a contest that feels heavier with meaning than any I've faced in years. I wake before Thomas can rouse me, the habits of a lifetime making my eyes open just as the first pale light seeps through the tent canvas. For a moment, I lie still on my pallet, listening to the quiet sounds of a world transitioning from night to day. My breath makes small clouds in the chilled air. Nights grow cold as autumn approaches, even if the days still hold summer's warmth. Today marks the final day of the tournament. After 2 days of combat, eliminations and surprises, only 4 knights remain in contention for the champion's purse and the Silver Falcon trophy, myself among them. My body reminds me of yesterday's matches with every movement. Bruises bloom across my ribs, where Sir Giles's lance struck a glancing blow, and my left shoulder throbs with a dull persistence that speaks of strained muscles. Getting too old for this nonsense, I mutter, pushing myself upright with a barely suppressed groan. Outside my tent, I hear Thomas moving quietly, likely preparing my morning meal and readying my armor for inspection. The boy has been worth his weight in gold these past days, working tirelessly to keep both Thunder and me in fighting condition. I pull on a simple linen shirt and woolen breeches, wincing as I raise my arms. A quick splash of cold water from the basin helps clear the fog of sleep, though I shiver at the shock. I run wet fingers through my beard, attempting to bring some order to it before the day's events. "Thomas," I call softly. The tent flap opens immediately. "Sir Robert, I've brought bread and cold meat for breaking your fast." The armorer returned your left pauldron, reinforced as you requested. I nod my thanks, taking the wooden plate he offers. "And Thunder?" "Fed and brushed, sir. I've kept him warm with an extra blanket through the night." He seems eager, pawing at the ground when I approached. "Good." I tear off a chunk of bread, chewing thoughtfully. "What news from the field?" Thomas hesitates just long enough for me to know something's afoot. "Sir Alan was seen visiting the tent of Lord Henry before dawn." They spoke at length. I raise an eyebrow. "Lord Henry, the tournament's judge, and a close kinsman to our own Lord William. Interesting. Seeking advantage, perhaps, or simply paying respects," Thomas offers diplomatically, though his expression suggests he believes otherwise. "Perhaps." I finish my meal quickly and stand. I want to see the field before the crowds arrive. "Bring my cloak." Moments later, we step out into the crystalline dawn. The tournament grounds spread before us, bathed in that peculiar light found only when night reluctantly yields to day. Not quite darkness, not quite true light, but something magical in between. Mist clings to the lower parts of the field, swirling around the wooden barriers of the jousting lanes like spirits of knights fallen in tournaments past. The stands, empty now, rise on both sides of the field. Banners hang limply in the still morning air. The royal arms, Lord William's golden eagle, and dozens more representing noble houses from across the realm. Workers move among the seats, sweeping away yesterday's debris and making repairs where needed. From the direction of the castle, wagons approach, bearing food and drink for the day's spectators. I walk slowly across the dew-dampened grass, my boots leaving dark prints behind me. Thomas follows a respectful distance back, carrying my cloak draped over his arm. The field feels different without the crowds, almost sacred in its emptiness, like a church awaiting worshippers. 3 matches, I murmur to myself. 3 more to claim the prize. My first opponent today will be Sir Edmund, a strange twist of fate that pits friend against friend. Beyond him waits either Sir Alan or young Sir Geoffrey, Lord William's nephew, who surprised everyone by unseating 2 renowned knights yesterday. I approach the jousting lists, running my hand along the wooden barrier that separates charging horses. The wood is smooth from years of use, polished by countless gauntleted hands that sought the same reassurance I now seek. The lane stretches away, 90 yards of packed earth, where fortune and skill dance together in violent harmony. Contemplating your defeat, old friend, a familiar voice calls. I turn to see Sir Edmund approaching, leaning slightly on a walking stick, a concession to stiffness that he would never permit himself once the crowds arrive. Simply choosing which part of the field would best display your fall, I reply with a grin. He laughs, coming to stand beside me at the barrier. For a moment, we simply exist in companionable silence, 2 aging warriors watching the mist slowly burn away as the sun climbs higher. Beautiful, isn't it? Edmund finally says. Sometimes I think this moment, the field at dawn, empty and full of possibility, is the true prize of tournaments. I nod, understanding completely. The calm before the storm. Speaking of storms, he lowers his voice. What have you heard about our friend from Aquitaine? I glance around, ensuring we're alone save for Thomas, who stands at a discreet distance, only that he paid an early morning visit to Lord Henry. Edmund's eyebrows rise. Indeed, I heard something else from my squire. Apparently Sir Alan's lance shattered strangely in his match yesterday, and some say the fragments showed signs of tampering. Tampering. This was serious. A grave breach of chivalric code if true. Nothing proven, Edmund cautions. But watch yourself if you face him. I nod, filing the information away. Cheating is not unknown in tournaments, though rare among knights of reputation. A hollowed lance, filled with lead or sand to increase impact, could turn a sporting contest deadly. The sun breaks fully above the eastern hills now, flooding the field with golden light that banishes the last of the mist. In that illumination, I notice details previously hidden. The rich embroidery on the judge's pavilion, the freshly painted shields hanging by the entrance gate, the delicate carving on the royal box where Lord William and his family will sit. More people begin to arrive, servants hastening to complete preparations, early spectators securing the best seats, squires carrying armor and weapons toward knights' pavilions. The quiet spell of dawn breaks, replaced by the growing bustle of an awakening tournament. From the castle's direction, a trumpet sounds the first call, signaling 2 hours until the day's contest begin. Birds startle from the nearby trees at the clarion note, wheeling against the brightening sky before settling again. Di should return, Edmund says, straightening and setting aside his walking stick. My squire will be wondering where I've wandered off to, until we meet in the lists, Robert. He extends his hand. I grasp his forearm firmly, in the warrior's grip we've shared countless times. Until then, may your lance break cleanly after mine finds its mark, of course. He laughs and turns away, his limp barely noticeable now as he assumes the bearing expected of a knight in the public eye. I remain by the barrier, watching as the tournament grounds transform from silent emptiness to bustling activity. Heralds in bright tabards gather near the announcing stand, practicing the day's proclamations in resonant voices. Stable hands lead destriers to the preparation area, the massive war horses snorting and tossing their heads as if already sensing the excitement to come. The wooden stands begin to creak and shift as the first spectators take their places, merchants and craftspeople who have closed their shops to witness the tournament's final day. Soon they'll be joined by minor nobility, then the great lords and ladies, until every bench holds its share of humanity, united in their hunger for spectacle and glory. Thomas approaches, holding out my cloak as the morning breeze freshens. It's nearly time to prepare, Sir Robert. I nod, taking one last look at the field bathed in morning light. Soon it will be transformed, filled with color, noise, danger, and opportunity. But for now, in this moment, I can still see it as it truly is, a simple field where men like me come to test the limits of courage and skill. Taking a deep breath of the cool morning air, I turn toward my tent. There is armor to don, prayers to whisper, and a destiny to meet. The tournament awaits, and with it, whatever fortune God and my own right arm can secure. Let's begin, I tell Thomas, squaring my shoulders despite their protest. The day won't wait for old knights and their contemplations.
The chapel stands apart from the noise and excitement of the tournament grounds, a small stone sanctuary nestled beneath ancient oaks. As I approach, the sounds of the crowd fade, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and distant birdsong. The wooden door, weathered and carved with simple crosses, stands slightly ajar, golden candlelight spilling out into the afternoon shadows. I pause at the threshold, suddenly aware of the weight I carry, not just my sword and the mud-spattered surcoat from earlier matches, but the expectations of my lord, my household, and my own stubborn pride. Thomas had offered to accompany me, but this moment calls for solitude before joining my fellow knights inside. Steady yourself, old man, I mutter, running a hand over my beard. My fingers come away damp with sweat, and I wipe them on my tunic. The day's earlier jousts have taken their toll. A bruise blooming across my left ribs, a shoulder that protests each movement, but I fared better than some. Sir Gareth had been carried from the field, his collarbone shattered by Sir Alan's lance. I cross myself and push the door open. The chapel interior embraces me with warmth and the sweet, heavy scent of incense. Dozens of beeswax candles flicker in wall sconces, and upon the modest altar, their light dancing across stone walls hung with simple tapestries depicting saints and martyrs. The air feels thick with centuries of prayers whispered beneath the low-beamed ceiling. 5 knights already kneel in the front row, heads bowed. I recognize Sir Edmund's broad shoulders and Sir William's distinctive red-gold hair. At the far end kneels Sir Alan himself, unnervingly still, like a falcon before it strikes. Father Benedict moves slowly among them, his soft Latin prayers barely audible. I move quietly to an empty space in the second row, my boots silent on the rush-strewn floor. Kneeling on the worn cushion, I place my sword before me, its point toward the altar and hilt near my hands, the traditional posture for a blessing of arms. The stone floor is hard against my knees, a discomfort I hardly notice after years of such ceremonies. The chapel door opens again, admitting Sir Hugh and Sir Martin, the last of our number to arrive. 8 knights in all will compete in the final rounds tomorrow, survivors of today's preliminary contests, now seeking divine favor for the challenges ahead. Father Benedict turns as the newcomers settle into place. He is an old man, white-bearded and stooped, but his eyes remain clear and knowing. He has blessed my arms before countless tournaments and twice before real battles. His voice, when he addresses us, carries surprising strength. Knights of the realm, he begins, you come before God with steel in your hands and glory in your hearts. I bow my head, feeling the familiar mix of humility and pride that these ceremonies always evoke. My sword lies before me, 3 feet of carefully forged steel that has served me for 15 years. Not the finest blade in Christendom, perhaps, but true and reliable, like an old friend. Remember, Father Benedict continues, moving to stand before the altar, that your strength comes not from arm or armor, but from righteousness. The tournament field is not merely a place of contest, but a mirror of God's judgment, where the worthy are exalted and the false brought low. A slight shifting among the knights suggests not everyone fully embraces this perspective. Tournament victories often owe more to practice and cunning than divine intervention. Still, no man here would refuse a blessing, whatever private doubts might lurk in his heart. Father Benedict lifts a small silver vessel, moving first to Sir William. Receive this blessing upon your arms, he intones, dipping his thumb into holy oil and making the sign of the cross on Sir William's forehead. May Saint Michael guide your sword arm, and Saint George protect you from harm. One by one he moves among the front row, blessing each knight with the same words. The chapel remains silent, save for his voice, and the occasional creak of leather as men shift their weight on aching knees. Through the small window high on the eastern wall, I can see the light changing. Afternoon sliding toward evening. When Father Benedict reaches me, I lift my face to receive the blessing. The oil is cool against my skin, its scent sharp and clean amid the heavier aromas of incense and candle wax. May Saint Michael guide your sword arm, and Saint George protect you from harm, he murmurs, his aged fingers surprisingly gentle as they mark my brow. My thanks, Father, I whisper in response, a tightness in my throat I hadn't expected. He nods slightly before moving on, a look passing between us that speaks of many such ceremonies, many tournaments, many years. How many more times will I kneel thus, I wonder, before age or injury finally claims my place in the lists? After blessing the final night, Father Benedict returns to the altar and lifts a wooden crucifix. Rise now and speak the oath of honor. We stand as one, each man's hand moving to rest upon the hilt of his sword.
The oath is ancient, spoken by countless knights across centuries of tournaments. I swear, we begin in unison, our voices blending in the stone chamber, to compete with honor and courage, to strike true but with mercy, to accept victory with humility and defeat with grace. Should God grant me triumph, I shall use it in his service. Should he decree my fall, I shall bear it as his will. My voice catches slightly on the final words. How easily we pledge to accept defeat as divine will. How much harder to feel it truly when lying in the dust with one's pride in tatters. But this is the bargain we make, presenting ourselves as champions of virtue, striving imperfectly toward that ideal. Father Benedict nods approvingly. Now take up your swords and receive the blessing upon your steed. I lift my blade, holding it horizontally before me with both hands. The weight feels right, familiar, an extension of my arm and will. Father Benedict moves once more among us, sprinkling each sword with holy water from a small silver aspergillum. When the cold droplets fade, they catch the candlelight like tiny stars before running in rivulets along the steel. A few drops reach my hands, and I resist the urge to wipe them away, accepting them as part of the ritual. Go now in peace, Father Benedict concludes, making a final sign of benediction. And remember that true victory lies not in conquest, but in honor. We bow our heads one final time before turning to leave. The ceremony complete, a subtle shift occurs, the shared solemnity giving way to individual thoughts of tomorrow's contest. Sir Hugh and Sir Martin speak quietly as they exit. Sir William claps Sir Edmund on the shoulder with a forced joviality that doesn't quite mask his nervous energy. Sir Alan remains a moment longer, his gaze meeting mine across the chapel. He inclines his head slightly, a gesture of respect between competitors. Before slipping out the door, I sheathe my sword slowly, savoring the ritual's lingering peace. Outside awaits the clamor of the tournament grounds, the tactical discussions with Thomas, the final preparations of armor and horse. But here, for just a moment longer, there is stillness. Father, I say quietly as the other knights depart, a private word if I may. Father Benedict approaches, his expression curious. What troubles you, Sir Robert? I hesitate, searching for words to express what lies heavy on my heart. I am no longer young. Each tournament now might be my last. He smiles gently. This fear visits all men in time. Not fear, I correct him, though perhaps there is some. But I wonder when the time comes to set aside sword and lance, what remains of a knight? Father Benedict considers this, his weathered hands folded before him. The same that remains of any man, the good he has done, the hearts he has touched, the honor he has upheld or forsaken. Simple words, yet they settle something restless within me. I nod gratefully. My thanks, Father. God go with you tomorrow, he replies. In victory or defeat, I bow once more and turn toward the door, toward the fading light of day, and the challenges that await with dawn. The blessing complete, my path forward clear. One more day of glory to be won or lost. One more chance to test the measure of my courage and skill against worthy opponents. Tomorrow will come soon enough. For now I carry the quiet strength of this moment with me as I step back into the world of men and steel.
We wait, in the shadow of the northern gate, a line of mounted knights stretching behind me like a river of steel and color. Thunder shifts beneath me, his impatience matching my own. The full weight of tournament armor presses down, gorget, breastplate, pauldrons, vambraces, gauntlets, greaves, each piece meticulously buckled and strapped by Thomas's careful hands. My shield hangs ready at my side, my family's crest, freshly painted in vibrant blue and silver. Nervous old man, Sir Edmund's voice comes from my right, his visor already raised. Despite the jest in his tone, I can see the same tension in his eyes that I feel in my gut, just eager to be done with this pageantry. I reply, adjusting my position in the saddle. All this standing about makes my arse numb. He chuckles, the sound echoing slightly in his helm. The ladies in the stands would be scandalized to hear such talk from their gallant knights. The ladies in the stands have no idea what it's like to sit in a metal pot while wearing another metal pot, I mutter, though I can't help but smile. Beyond the gate, we can hear the growing roar of the crowd. The tournament field has been filling since midday. Nobles in the covered stands with their colorful canopies, common folk standing at the barriers, merchants, hawking everything from meat pies to ribbons and knight's colors. The air smells of trampled grass, horse, and the distinctive tang of metal warming in the sun. A squire rushes past, carrying a message to the knights further back in line. Thomas appears at my stirrup, his face flushed with excitement. "They're nearly ready for the procession, sir," he reports, handing up a water skin. The herald has the roll of knights prepared. I take a long drink, savoring the coolness as it washes down my throat. Even this small pleasure feels magnified before the tournament. Every sensation somehow sharper, more vivid, as if my body knows to treasure these moments before risk. "My helm," I say, handing back the water skin. Thomas retrieves my great helm from where it hangs at Thunderer's saddle. Unlike the lighter helm I wore for practice, this one will completely encase my head during combat. The weight of it is substantial, but the protection worth every ounce. "A fine day for glory, Sir Robert," Thomas says as he passes it up, his young face solemn with the importance of the moment. I nod, feeling a sudden rush of fondness for the boy. A fine day indeed. "And Thomas," I pause, making sure he meets my eyes. "Whatever happens in the lists, you've served me well. Remember that." His chest swells visibly at the praise. "I won't let you down, sir." From the field comes the clarion call of trumpets, 3 long blasts that silence the crowd momentarily. The herald's voice follows, impossibly loud in the hush. "Lords and ladies, good people of the realm, by the grace of God and the generosity of Lord William, Earl of Westmoreland, welcome to the feast of St. Michael's tournament." The crowd roars its approval. I settle my helm into place, the familiar darkness descending as the world narrows to what I can see through the eye slit. Thomas hands me my lance, full tournament weight now, freshly painted in my colors with a steel tip that gleams wickedly in the afternoon sun. Ahead, the knights at the front of the line begin to move. Sir Edmund salutes me with a raised hand before lowering his own visor. "The procession has begun. God speed you, sir," Thomas says, stepping back. Thunderer needs no command to follow the horses ahead. The space between his ears becomes my focus point as we approach the gate. His red-brown mane freshly braided with blue ribbons to match my colors. His powerful muscles bunch and flow beneath me, a reminder of the partnership that has carried me through many tournaments before this one. We pass through the gate, and suddenly the world expands into light and sound. The tournament field stretches before us, a vast rectangle bounded by colorful barriers and thronged with spectators. Banners snap in the breeze from poles surrounding the field. The royal arms, Lord William's eagle, the badges of visiting nobles, and the personal standards of competing knights. The crowd's roar washes over us like a wave as we emerge. I sit straighter in the saddle, lance held perfectly upright, shield displayed to advantage. Despite my earlier complaints about pageantry, pride swells in my chest. This moment, this ancient ritual of chivalry, connects me to every knight who has ridden before me, and everyone who will come after. We proceed at a stately walk around the perimeter of the field, allowing the spectators to admire the assembled knights in their finery. Ladies wave delicate handkerchiefs from the stands. Children point and bounce with excitement. Men raise cups in salute to favored champions. The herald begins to announce each knight as we pass the main viewing stand where Lord William sits with his guests. Sir Hugh of Dartmoor, bearing the black bear on crimson. Sir Giles de Montfort, the golden lion rampant. Sir Edmund of Blackwood, 3 silver stags on forest green. My friend raises his lance in salute as his name is called, earning an appreciative cheer from the crowd. As we draw nearer to the stand, I search the faces of the noble onlookers. Lord William sits at the center,
resplendent in his finest clothes, with Lord Geoffrey beside him. Lady Matilda is there too, surrounded by her ladies in waiting, and slightly behind her, my heart gives an unexpected lurch. Lady Eleanor, Lord William's widowed sister, has returned from her estates in the north. I had not known she would attend. 5 years since I last saw her, yet I would know her anywhere. The proud tilt of her head, the copper gold hair now more subtly threaded with silver, the keen intelligence in her gray eyes. Those eyes find mine through my visor, as if she can see past steel to the man beneath. The smallest of smiles touches her lips, a private thing meant only for me. My pulse quickens, memories flooding back of stolen moments in the castle garden, of conversations that lasted until dawn, of a connection severed by duty and circumstance, but never truly broken. Sir Robert of Ashfield, the silver falcon on Azure, the herald announces. With effort, I pull my attention back to the ceremony, raising my lance high in salute to Lord William. The crowd cheers. I have some reputation in these parts, and the common folk appreciate a knight who has risen through skill rather than birth alone. As I pass the stand, Eleanor inclines her head slightly, the gesture so subtle that few would notice, but I do, and warmth spreads through me that has nothing to do with the weight of armor or the heat of the day. We complete our circuit of the field, coming to rest in formation before the main stand. 26 knights in all, each resplendent in polished armor and colorful surcoats, lances reaching toward the sky like a forest of martial aspens. Lord William rises, raising his hands for silence. The crowd gradually quiets, anticipation building for his words. Knights of the realm, his voice carries clearly across the field. Today you compete for honor, for glory, and for this. A page steps forward, carrying a cushion upon which rests a magnificent sword, its hilt wrapped in blue leather and adorned with silver wire, a sapphire gleaming in the pommel. The sword of St. Michael, forged by Master Aldwin of London, with a blade of the finest Toledo steel. May it serve its winner well in defense of the righteous. A murmur of appreciation runs through the assembled knights. Such a prize would be worthy of royal tournaments, let alone our provincial gathering. Lord William has outdone himself. Remember the laws of chivalry. Lord William continues, fight with courage, with honor and with mercy. May God look favorably upon your contest. He makes the sign of the cross. Let the tournament begin. The trumpets sound again, and the crowd erupts in cheers. We break formation, each knight moving to his assigned position for the first round of jousting. As I guide Thunderer toward the eastern end of the field, I feel Eleanor's eyes following me. The tournament marshal approaches, scroll in hand to inform me of my first opponent. The excitement of the procession gives way to the focused clarity of impending combat. Soon the pageantry will end, and the true test will begin. Steel against steel, skill against skill, man against man. I take a deep breath, centering myself for what lies ahead. Thunderer seems to sense my mood, standing perfectly still now, waiting for my command. The weight of armor, the press of the helm, the eyes of the crowd all fade to background awareness. There is only the field before me, the lance in my hand, and the next challenge to be met.
The blue and silver pavilion shields me from the midday sun, casting everything inside in cool, gentle shadow. I stand in the center, upon a square of canvas, arms outstretched like Christ on the cross, while Thomas works methodically around me. The familiar ritual of arming has begun. How's the crowd looking? I ask, unable to see outside from my position. Thomas glances through the open flap as he returns with my cuisses, the steel plates that will protect my thighs. Growing by the minute, sir. Lord William's stands are nearly full, and merchants are doing brisk business with the common folk. I heard a man taking wagers on the first tilt. I snort softly. And the odds? Thomas hesitates, a smile tugging at his lips. 3-1 in Sir Elaine's favor. 3-2, the bastards. I can't help but laugh. I've been jousting since that Aquitaine puppy was soiling his swaddling clothes. Shall I place a wager for you, sir? Thomas grins, kneeling to secure the creases to my thighs with practiced movements, and tempt God's humor. I think not. I flex my knee as he tightens a strap, testing the fit, though 3-to-1 is tempting. The pavilion smells of leather and steel, of beeswax and oil used to keep the armor supple and rust-free. A brazier burns in the corner, not for warmth on this summer day, but ready with hot coals should any last-minute adjustments to the armor be needed. My sword and shield rest on a trestle table, alongside my helm and gauntlets, waiting patiently for their moment. Thomas moves to the greaves next, strapping the steel plates around my calves. The metal is cool against my woolen chausses. Each piece of armor adds weight, like slowly sinking into deep water. Yet rather than drowning, the weight is comforting. A second skin I've worn 100 times before. Your knee giving you any trouble today? Thomas asks quietly, glancing up as he secures the greave over my left leg, the one that troubles me in damp weather. Nothing worth mentioning. I lie, and we both know it. The knee had twinged during practice, but not badly enough to concern me. The warmth of the day helps. With my legs armored, Thomas retrieves my breastplate from its stand. The polished steel catches what little light filters through the pavilion's fabric, sending ripples of brightness across the interior. My family crest is engraved upon the right breast, 3 falcons in flight above an oak tree. Ready for the weight, sir? Thomas asks, lifting the heavy piece. I take a deep breath and nod. Always. Together we maneuver the breastplate into position. The familiar pressure settles across my chest and back as Thomas secures it to the backplate with leather straps and buckles at my sides. 40 pounds of steel embraces me like an old friend, constraining yet reassuring. Christ, but it gets heavier every year, I mutter, shifting my shoulders to settle the weight properly. Perhaps the armor is growing, sir. Thomas replies with the hint of a smile. Or its wearer is shrinking. I counter, returning his smile. Either way, I'll be grateful for a hot bath and a good rub with comfrey oil tonight. Outside, a trumpet sounds the second call. 1 hour until the tournament begins in earnest. My stomach tightens, not with fear but with anticipation. That familiar stirring in the blood that comes before testing oneself against worthy opponents. Thomas continues his work, attaching my pauldrons to protect my shoulders, followed by braces and vambraces for my upper and lower arms. Each piece clicks and settles into place with satisfying precision. The armor, custom made for my frame years ago, knows my body as well as any lover might. I saw Sir Edmund earlier. Thomas says as he works, his gout is troubling him. He's withdrawn from the joust but will compete in the sword contests tomorrow. I frown slightly. Pity. I enjoy tilting against him. He's predictable but honorable. Unlike some, Thomas adds, his meaning clear. We've both heard the whispers about Sir Alain, how his lance sometimes strikes suspiciously close to vulnerable joints rather than the center of the shield. We'll see what manner of knight he proves to be, I say, flexing my arms to test my range of movement. The lists have a way of revealing a man's true character. Thomas fetches my gauntlets, articulated plates over leather gloves that will protect my hands, while allowing the dexterity needed to control lance and reins. Before he helps me don them, I reach for my sword on the table. The familiar weight of it centers me. As my fingers close around the leather-wrapped hilt, I draw it partially from its scabbard, just enough to see the gleam of well-maintained steel and the maker's mark near the crossguard. This blade has served me for 15 years, since I won it from a Burgundian knight, who thereafter became one of my closest friends. He fell at Crissy. This sword in hand, I purchased it from his widow at twice its worth, still sharp enough to shave with. I murmur, sliding it back into its scabbard. though I wouldn't recommend trying, sir, Thomas quips, taking the sword and setting it aside to hang from my belt after the final pieces of armor are in place. The next several minutes pass in familiar routine: touters to protect my elbows, a mail skirt beneath my falled and tassets to guard my hips and upper thighs, each piece another layer of protection, another barrier between vulnerable flesh and the lance's punishing impact. How many tilts since your first, sir? Thomas asks conversationally as he kneels to check the fit of my sabatons, the articulated steel plates covering my feet. I consider for a moment. 217 by my count, though only the Virgin knows how many practices and how many victories. I chuckle. Fewer than my vanity would prefer, more than my opponents would like to remember. A commotion outside draws our attention. Through the open pavilion flap, I glimpse a procession of mounted heralds in Lord William's colors, moving through the gathering crowd toward the tournament field. Their trumpets gleam in the sunlight. Nearly time, I murmur, more to myself than to Thomas. Just the helm remains, sir. Thomas retrieves my great helm from the table. Unlike the visored bassinets favored by some knights, I prefer the full helm for jousting, a solid piece that completely encases the head, with a narrow eye slit and small breathing holes. Less comfortable perhaps, but better protection. Before Thomas places it over my head, I reach for the padded arming cap and corf that will cushion my skull from the helm's interior. The linen is cool against my sweat-dampened hair. A moment, I say, holding up a hand. From beneath my gambeson, I withdraw the small wooden cross on its leather cord, my mother's parting gift when I first left home to train as a squire. I press my lips to it briefly before tucking it safely away again. For luck, Thomas asks softly. For remembrance, I correct him. We make our own luck in the lists. Thomas nods and raises the helm. I take a final deep breath of unfiltered air, savoring the scent of leather and oil, of canvas warmed by the summer day. Then the helm descends, enclosing my head in darkness. Momentarily, before my eyes adjust to the narrow slit, sounds become distant, muffled, the world reduced to what I can see through a horizontal strip, no wider than 2 fingers. Thomas secures the helm to my gorget with a leather strap, then steps back to survey his work. Though I cannot see his expression clearly through my limited vision, I sense his pride in his craftsmanship. How do I look? I ask, my voice echoing strangely inside the helm. Like death himself come to claim the field, sir. Thomas replies with a grin in his voice. Let's hope death remains a spectator today. I take an experimental step, then another, adjusting to the weight and balance of the full armor. 60 pounds of steel encases me from head to toe, transforming me from mere man to living fortress. Thomas helps me belt on my sword, then hands me my gauntlets. I pull them on, feeling the transformation complete as articulated steel fingers close around my own. I flex them experimentally, making a fist, then relaxing. Outside, the trumpets sound again. The third and final call. The crowd's murmur swells in response, like the tide coming in. Your shield and lance await at the lists, sir, Thomas says, moving to hold open the pavilion flap. Thunderer is saddled and ready. I nod, the helm heavy on my shoulders. Then let us not keep our audience waiting. I move toward the light, each step measured and deliberate. The armor no longer feels like a burden, but a part of me, the outward manifestation of inner purpose. Beyond the pavilion's shadow, the summer sun strikes my armor, igniting it into blinding brilliance. As I emerge, I glimpse another armored figure exiting a pavilion across the field, tall and imposing in black and silver plate. Even at this distance, I recognize the azure surcoat with its silver falcon. Sir Elaine of Aquitaine, bound for the same destination as I. Our eyes meet across the distance, 2 warriors locked in mutual assessment,
Through narrow helmet slits, neither of us nods or makes any gesture of acknowledgement. No words are needed. The list field awaits, and there steel and skill will speak for us both.
The herald's voice fades into the background as I lower my visor. My world shrinks to a narrow strip of light, framing the jousting lane that stretches before me like a path to glory or defeat. Thunder shifts beneath me, his massive body trembling with contained energy. I can feel his heart beating in time with my own through the layers of padding and steel that separate us. "Steady, old friend," I whisper, my voice echoing inside my helm. "We've done this 100 times before, but never against Sir Elaine of Aquitaine. Never with Lord William and half the countryside watching. Never with so much whispered speculation about whether my best days lie behind me." From across the tilt yard, my opponent sits astride a midnight black destrier. Even at this distance, I can see the beast's muscles rippling beneath its glossy coat. Sir Elaine's armor gleams in the afternoon sun, his shield bearing the azure and silver falcon that has become feared in tournaments across 3 counties. The plume on his helm, dyed blue to match his colors, flutters slightly in the breeze. Thomas appears at my stirrup, his young face serious as he hands me my shield. I settle it on my left arm, feeling its reassuring weight and the familiar grip of the leather straps against my palm. His third lance had a slight warp when I watched his squire checking it, Thomas murmurs. Might favor his right more than usual to compensate. I nod, grateful once again for Thomas's keen eye. Watch his approach. If he shifts his seat before the last moment, I'll signal with the red cloth. Thomas finishes. We've worked together long enough to develop these small strategies, these tiny advantages that can make all the difference between victory and a broken collarbone. The crowd hums with anticipation, a living thing that surrounds the lists like an ocean. Banners snap in the breeze, a riot of colors representing noble houses from across the realm. Somewhere among them, Lord William's golden eagle on crimson waves proudly. I am his champion today, carrying his honor and mine upon my shoulders. The herald raises his staff, and the crowd's murmur fades to expectant silence. First course of the joust, Sir Robert of Westmoreland, champion of Lord William. A cheer rises from our side of the field. I raise my gauntleted hand in acknowledgement, feeling a surge of pride despite the nervous flutter in my gut. Facing Sir Elaine of Aquitaine, champion of Lord Geoffrey, the answering cheer is just as loud. I take a deep breath, centering myself as Thomas hands me my lance, 14 feet of solid ash, its tip blunted for tournament use, but still capable of unseating a man or breaking bone if it strikes true. The weight of it is comforting, a familiar extension of my arm after so many years. I place the butt in my stirrup momentarily, allowing myself one final adjustment of my seat and armor. Everything must be perfect. A strap too loose, a piece of plate shifting at the wrong moment. Such small things have laid many a good night low. Thomas steps back, his job done for now. "Godspeed, Sir Robert," he says, the formal words carrying the weight of genuine concern. "And may he turn his face from Sir Elaine just for the next few minutes," I reply with a wry smile hidden behind my visor. The herald raises his staff higher. "Knights, make ready." I guide Thunder to the starting position, feeling him gather himself beneath me like a coiled spring. Across the field, Sir Elaine does the same, his black destrier pawing at the ground. I lower my lance to the rest position and steady my shield. The world contracts further until there is nothing but the lane, my opponent, and the singular purpose that drives us both toward this moment of truth. "Knights, salute your opponent." I raise my lance in the formal gesture acknowledging Sir Elaine as a fellow warrior worthy of respect, regardless of what happens next. He returns the salute with equal gravity,
The herald's staff drops. Begin. I squeeze my thighs against Thunderer's sides and feel him launch forward like a bolt from a crossbow. The ground blurs beneath us, the lane narrowing in my vision until there is only the approaching figure of Sir Alain growing larger with each thundering hoofbeat. The roar of the crowd fades entirely. In these precious seconds there exists a strange peace, a perfect clarity that comes only in moments of utmost danger and exertion. I breathe in rhythm with Thunderer's strides, adjusting my lance by inches as we close the distance. I can see Sir Alain now, his lance leveled at my chest. His posture is perfect, his aim unwavering. This is no novice knight seeking glory, but a seasoned warrior who has unseated dozens of challengers. 20 yards, 15, 10. I shift my shield slightly higher, anticipating his aim. Thomas's intelligence was good. Sir Alain does indeed seem to favor his right side, his lance drifting almost imperceptibly in that direction. 5 yards. I brace myself for impact, every muscle tensing in perfect unison. Time seems to slow as we hurtle toward each other at combined speeds that would shatter bone and flesh without the protection of armor and skill. The impact when it comes is like being struck by lightning. Sir Alain's lance glances off my raised shield with enough force to numb my entire arm. But the angle is wrong. He doesn't unhorse me. My own lance strikes his shoulder, a solid hit that sends splinters flying as the ash shaft shatters with a crack like thunder. The force reverberates up my arm, rattling my teeth despite my padded coif. For one heart-stopping moment, I feel myself sliding in the saddle, but years of training take over. I clench my thighs tighter, shift my weight, and maintain my seat as Thunderer carries me to the end of the lane. The crowd erupts into cheers and gasps. I toss the broken shaft aside and wheel Thunderer around to see Sir Alain doing the same. Neither of us unseated. A draw on the first pass. Well struck. I call across the field, the traditional acknowledgement of a worthy opponent. Sir Alain raises his gauntlet in response, his face hidden behind his visor, but his posture revealing nothing but determined readiness for the second pass. Thomas hurries forward with a fresh lance, his face flushed with excitement. Good deflection with the shield, sir. His aim was true, but you turned it perfectly. I flex my left arm, wincing at the deep ache that has already settled into the muscle. He hits like a battering ram. I won't be lifting this arm tomorrow. I take a long breath, calming my racing heart. How did he take my strike? Solid hit to the shoulder, but he recovered well. No advantage either way. I nod, taking the new lance and testing its weight and balance. Perfect. The crowd's roar settles to an expectant murmur as we prepare for the second pass. The herald raises his staff again. Second course. Knights, make ready. I guide Thunderer back to the starting position, noting how Sir Alain adjusts his shield position slightly. He's learned from our first exchange, as have I. This pass will be different, each of us seeking to exploit the weaknesses we've discovered. My heartbeat steadies. The initial rush of fear and excitement has passed, leaving behind the calm focus that has served me through countless tournaments and battles. I regulate my breathing, feeling the weight of the armor distribute across my body as I settle deeper into my saddle. Knights, salute your opponent. Again we raise our lances in the formal gesture of respect. The sun catches on Sir Alain's armor, sending a flash of light across the field. The crowd holds its collective breath. The herald's staff drops. Begin. Thunderer surges forward once more, his hoofs drumming a war beat against the packed earth. Dust rises around us like a golden cloud in the afternoon sun. I lower my lance to the attack position, sighting along its length towards Sir Alain's approaching figure. This time I watch for his subtler movements, the slight shift of weight, the angle of his shield, the positioning of his lance. The thunder of hoofs fills my ears, but beneath it runs the steady current of my focus, honed by decades of martial training. As we close the final distance, I make my decision. Instead of raising my shield to deflect as before, I shift it lower and angle my body slightly, presenting a more difficult target. It's a calculated risk. If I've read him wrong, his lance will take me squarely in the chest. The distance vanishes between us. Sir Elaine's lance comes straight for my heart, but at the last possible instant, I twist in the saddle. His lance glances off my armor with a shriek of metal on metal. My own lance strikes true, catching the edge of his shield and driving into his chest plate. The impact is tremendous. My lance shatters again, and I feel Sir Elaine's body absorb the blow. He rocks backward in his saddle but remarkably maintains his seat. A lesser knight would have been hurled to the ground by such a hit. We thunder past each other, and I hear the crowd's deafening response. When I reach the end of the lane and turn, I see Sir Elaine still mounted but listing slightly to one side. His squire rushes to his stirrup, steadying him as he catches his breath. A mighty blow, Sir Robert, comes a call from the stands. I recognize Lord William's voice, rich with approval. Thomas brings my third lance, his eyes wide. You nearly had him. One more pass like that, and victory is yours. I take the lance, feeling the familiar weight even as my arm trembles with exertion. Don't count victory before it's won, I caution, though I can't help but feel a surge of confidence. He's wounded, but a wounded falcon still has talons. Across the field, Sir Elaine straightens in his saddle. Even at this distance, I can sense his determination, his refusal to yield. This final pass will decide everything, and both of us know it.
The afternoon sun hangs lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the combat ring where I stand, my boots planted firmly in the packed earth. Sweat trickles down my back beneath my gambeson and mail, a constant reminder of the day's exertions. The jousting portion of the tournament is complete. I managed 2 victories before Sir Elaine unseated me in the 3rd round, but the melee contests have just begun. Thomas hands me my sword, 3 feet of well-balanced steel that has served me faithfully for nearly a decade. The familiar weight settles into my palm like greeting an old friend. My shield, bearing the blue and silver of my house, feels heavier than it did this morning. Fatigue is beginning to make itself known in my shoulders and forearms. Who draws against me? I ask, flexing my sword hand to keep the muscles loose. Sir Giles of Northumberland, Thomas replies, adjusting the strap on my shield one last time. Younger son of Baron Wendell, quick with a blade, from what I've heard, but inexperienced in tournament combat. I nod, grateful for the information. Quick is trouble for old knights like me. I mutter, only half joking. Keep the water ready. This might be a long contest. The combat ring is a simple circle, perhaps 40 paces across, enclosed by a wooden fence that separates the combatants from spectators. Lords and ladies watch from shaded stands while common folk crowd the edges, jostling for the best view. The smell of dust, sweat, and spilled ale hangs in the air, mingling with the scent of roasting meat from vendors working the crowd. Across the ring, my opponent enters. Sir Giles is indeed young, perhaps 25 summers, with the lean build of a man who relies on speed rather than power. His armor gleams in the sunlight, obviously new and largely unmarked by battle or tournament. His squire fusses with his helmet, a boy who looks barely old enough to lift a sword. Remember, Thomas says quietly, your experience is worth more than his youth. Let him tire himself. Wise words. I've outlasted many younger opponents who exhausted themselves with flashy, unnecessary movements. The herald steps into the center of the ring, raising his staff for attention. The next contest of arms shall be between Sir Robert of Westmoreland. A cheer rises from those who have supported me throughout the day, and Sir Giles of Northumberland. Another cheer, though somewhat less enthusiastic. The young knight has yet to make his reputation. The contest shall continue until one knight yields or is rendered unable to continue. The herald continues. No blows to the back, no strikes after a knight has fallen. May honor guide your swords. With that, he backs away to the edge of the ring, and for a moment, Sir Giles and I simply regard each other across the dusty circle. God grant you strength, Sir Giles, I call the traditional greeting before combat. And you, Sir Robert, he replies, his voice carrying the lilting accent of the North, though perhaps not too much. A small ripple of laughter runs through the crowd at his quip. I smile despite myself. Confidence is good in a young knight, though too much can be dangerous. We begin to circle each other, shields raised, swords at the ready. The wooden fence creaks as spectators lean against it, eager for the clash of steel. My boots raise small clouds of dust with each careful step. I study Sir Giles's movement, light on his feet, certainly, with the bouncing step of a man with energy to spare. He makes the first move, darting forward with surprising speed to deliver a testing slash toward my shoulder. I raise my shield easily, deflecting the blow with a hollow thunk of steel on wood. The impact travels up my arm, but I've braced for it properly. No damage done. Good speed, I acknowledge, countering with a measured strike of my own. Not committed, merely probing his defenses. He parries with his blade rather than his shield, the steel ringing clear in the afternoon air. Good patience, he returns, resuming his circling. And so it begins, the dance of combat that is both deadly serious and strangely beautiful. We exchange blows methodically, neither rushing nor retreating unnecessarily. The crowd fades from my awareness. The noise of their cheers becomes distant, like waves breaking on a far shore. There is only the ring, my opponent, and the rhythm of combat. Strike, parry, counter-strike. The familiar pattern settles into my muscles, a knowledge deeper than thought. My sword feels lighter now, moving as an extension of my arm rather than a separate object. When Sir Giles lunges with a quick thrust toward my ribs, my shield is already there, turning the blow aside. Not bad, old man, he grunts, narrowly avoiding my counter. Still learning, pup, I reply, pressing forward with a series of controlled strikes that force him back 2 steps. The sun beats down on us, and sweat now runs freely down my face, occasionally stinging my eyes. My breath comes harder, but I'm careful to control it, to find the measured rhythm that will sustain me. Sir Giles, for all his youth, is beginning to breathe heavily as well. His initial bursts of speed are becoming less frequent, his footwork less precise. We separate briefly, circling again, each taking the opportunity to catch our breath. The dust we've kicked up hangs in the air like a golden haze, catching the sunlight. I can taste it on my lips, gritty and dry. My sword arm aches dully, a familiar companion in combat. Thought you'd have yielded by now, Sir Giles calls, trying to mask his fatigue with bravado. I smile grimly. Days young yet, I respond, though in truth, my body is beginning to protest the cumulative strain of jousting. And now this duel. He comes at me again, this time with a flurry of strikes meant to overwhelm. High, low, then a deceptive feint followed by a true slash at my left side. I block the first 2, sidestep the feint, but the final blow catches the edge of my shield rather than its center. The impact twists painfully against my forearm. Ha, he exclaims, sensing advantage, but experience counters enthusiasm. That, as he presses forward, I pivot slightly, letting his momentum carry him past my guard just enough to tap the flat of my sword against his back as he moves by. Not a scoring blow by tournament rules, but a reminder that in real combat he would now be dead. Mind your positioning, I say quietly, not as taunt but as genuine advice. His face flushes visibly beneath his helmet, his eyes narrowing. The next exchange is more heated, our swords meeting with greater force, sending vibrations up my arm that make my teeth ache. The crowd roars its approval, sensing the shift in intensity. Time seems to stretch and compress strangely. I cannot say how long we battle. It might be minutes or an hour. The sun continues its slow descent, the quality of light changing subtly. My world narrows to the immediate needs of combat.
The angle of my shield, the positioning of my feet, the weight distribution that keeps me balanced against each impact. Sir Giles begins to show more obvious signs of tiring. His shield drops lower between strikes. His recovery's becoming slower. I maintain steady pressure. Nothing flashy, nothing desperate, just the methodical application of steel against his increasingly labored defense. When the moment comes, it arrives with the clarity of long experience. Sir Giles overextends on a thrust, committing too much weight forward. I step to the side, parrying his blade wide with my sword, then bring the edge of my shield up hard against his wrist. It's a practiced move, controlled to cause pain without injury. His sword flies from his grasp, landing with a dull thud in the dust several paces away. The crowd's roar swells, but I hold my blade steady, its point hovering before Sir Giles' throat. For a moment I see frustration and wounded pride war in his eyes. Then with admirable grace he raises his empty hand. "I yield, Sir Robert," he says clearly. "The match is yours." I lower my sword immediately, stepping back to offer him the space dignity requires. "Well fought, Sir Giles," I reply, loud enough for others to hear. "You'll be a formidable opponent in years to come." The herald steps forward, raising his staff toward me. "Victory to Sir Robert of Westmoreland." As the crowd cheers, I feel the full weight of exhaustion settle into my bones. My shield arm throbs and every muscle seems to protest simultaneously. Yet there is satisfaction too, the deep contentment of skill well applied, of youth countered by experience. Thomas appears at my side, taking my shield and offering water, which I drink gratefully. The cool liquid washes away the dust in my throat. "Well done, sir," he says, his eyes bright with pride. "That's 2 sword victories today. Only the archery and final melee remain." I nod, casting my gaze toward the archery butts being prepared at the far end of the tournament grounds. The sun will be setting soon, casting long golden rays across the field where tomorrow's final contests will determine the tournament champion. "Help me out of this mail," I say, rolling my shoulder to ease the stiffness. I need to rest these old bones before facing whatever challenge comes next. As Thomas leads me from the ring, Sir Giles approaches, having retrieved his sword and composed himself. "Sir Robert," he calls, "might I ask how you knew to counter my thrust in that final exchange?" I pause, seeing the genuine desire to learn in his eyes. This is how knighthood perpetuates itself, through the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. "Come to my tent when you've rested," I offer. "We'll share wine and I'll show you." The technique was taught to me by Sir Edric of Lancaster. God rest his soul, some 15 years past. Sir Giles nods gratefully, and I continue toward my tent, where quiet and rest await, a brief respite before the tournament's final challenges tomorrow. My fingers fumble with the leather straps of my helmet, clumsy with exhaustion. 3 jousts, in quick succession, have left my arms feeling like lead weights. When Thomas appears at my side to assist, I surrender to his help with a grateful nod. The relief as the helmet lifts away is immediate. Sweet air touches my face, cooling the rivers of sweat that course down my temples and neck. "Here, sir." Thomas presses a goblet of water into my trembling hand. The metal is blessedly cool against my palm. I drain half in one desperate swallow, water spilling down my chin and onto my gambeson. I don't care. The liquid feels like life itself, flowing down my parched throat. "Christ's mercy," I gasp, finding my voice at last. I thought that last pass would crack my ribs clean through. My tent offers blessed sanctuary from the punishing midday sun. The canvas walls glow with diffused golden light, creating a hazy, dreamlike atmosphere. Outside, the roar of the crowd ebbs and flows like ocean tides as the next contestants are announced. In here, though, time seems to slow, stretching each moment of respite into a precious gift. The tent itself isn't large, perhaps 15 paces across, but it's well appointed. A camp bed waits in one corner with fresh linens. A small table holds pitchers of water and wine, bread, cheese, and sliced apples. My banner hangs from the center pole, the blue and silver colors a reminder of everything I fight to uphold. I lower myself onto a folding wooden chair with a groan that starts somewhere deep in my soul. Every joint protests, every muscle trembles with fatigue. My right shoulder, the one that's absorbed the impact of countless lance strikes over the decades, throbs with a deep, insistent pain. That strike from Sir Hugh nearly had you, Thomas observes as he begins the methodical process of removing pieces of my armor. First the pauldrons, then the vambraces that protect my forearms. I flex my right hand, wincing at the stiffness in my fingers. He's improved since last year, straighter in the saddle, better control of his lance. Still not good enough, Thomas says with the fierce loyalty that warms my heart despite my exhaustion. I manage a weary smile. Not today, at least. The process of removing armor is almost as complex as putting it on. Each piece must be handled carefully, inspected for damage, and set aside in proper order for when it must be donned again. The weight that lifts from my body with each removed section brings incremental relief, like a man slowly rising to the surface after being deep underwater. As Thomas works on the buckles of my breastplate, a servant enters bearing a basin of clean water and fresh cloths. She's a girl of perhaps 16, with a dusting of freckles across her nose and the quick, efficient movements of someone who knows her task well. Lady Matilda sent these, sir, she says with a quick curtsy, and wishes to know if you require the physic. I consider this, the physic a man learned in medicine who travels with Lord William's household, could offer a poultice for my shoulder, perhaps a draught for the pain, but his services will be in higher demand for knights with more serious injuries. My thanks to her ladyship, I reply, but no, there are others with greater need. The girl nods and sets down the basin before departing. Outside, the herald's voice rises above the crowd noise, announcing Sir Elaine of Aquitaine for his next match. My gut tightens instinctively at the name. I've watched him unhorse 3 opponents today with ruthless efficiency. If the brackets continue as expected, we'll meet in the final round. Thomas finally lifts away my breastplate, and I exhale fully for what feels like the first time in hours. Beneath the armor, my padded gambeson is soaked with sweat, clinging to my body like a second skin. Even the simple linen shirt beneath that is drenched. Arms up, Thomas instructs, and I comply like a child being undressed by his nurse, too weary to do otherwise. The gambeson comes off, followed by the shirt. The cool air against my bare torso raises goose flesh, but the sensation is gloriously refreshing. Thomas dips a cloth in the basin and hands it to me. The water is cool but not cold, perfect for washing away the sweat and grime of combat without shocking my overheated body. I draw the damp cloth across my chest and neck, then over my face, relishing the simple pleasure of being clean. My body bears the evidence of a lifetime in armor, pale scars across my ribs where a sword found a gap at Shrewsbury, the puckered reminder of an arrow wound from the Welsh campaign, and countless smaller marks. The newest bruises are already blooming across my right side, purple and angry where Sir Hugh's lance struck. Bad, Thomas asks, noticing my wince as I probe the tender area. I've had worse from falling off a mounting block, I lie, earning a skeptical look from my squire. He hands me a fresh shirt, the linen soft against my skin as I pull it over my head. Simple comforts like this seem almost sinfully luxurious in the midst of a tournament day. From outside comes the thunderous clash of lances on shields, followed by a collective gasp from the crowd, then wild cheering. Someone has been unhorsed, spectacularly, by the sound of it. Sir Elaine again, mutters a voice from the tent entrance. I look up to see Sir Edmund leaning on a walking staff, his left leg heavily bandaged. His morning joust ended with a fall that twisted his knee badly. You should be resting, I chide him but gesture to the second chair nonetheless, and miss seeing you battered to a pulp, not bloody likely. He limps forward and lowers himself gingerly into the chair. Besides, my tent is too damned hot, the sun hits it directly. Thomas pours water for Edmund without being asked and returns to the task of inspecting my armor. The dents in the breastplate will need attention before my next bout. "How's Sir Hugh?" I ask, remembering the solid impact of our last pass. "Bruised pride mostly," Edmund grunts, claims his saddle slipped. "It didn't." "Of course it didn't, but we allow men their stories, don't we?" He sips his water, studying me over the rim of his cup. "You'll face Elaine next if you win against Sir Giles." I nod, having already calculated the progression. Giles first, one challenge at a time. Wise. Edmund shifts, wincing as he adjusts his injured leg. Giles favors his right side, keeps his shield too low on the approach. This is how it's always been between knights like us, rivals who may face each other tomorrow, yet share insights today. The brotherhood of arms transcends the temporary competition of a tournament. Outside, the herald announces a brief interval while the lists are prepared for the next round of matches. The crowd noise diffuses as spectators seek refreshment or relief. Inside the tent, a peaceful lull descends. Even Thomas pauses in his work, taking a moment to eat a piece of bread and cheese. I lean back in my chair, allowing my eyes to close briefly. The sounds fade to a pleasant hum. Thomas's quiet movements, Edmund's occasional shift in his seat, the distant murmur of the crowd. The pain in my shoulder ebbs slightly, becoming just another sensation among many rather than the center of my awareness. For this moment, there is no next bout, no Sir Elaine to face, no expectations to fulfill. There is only this tent, this chair, this breathing space between challenges. I've learned over the years to treasure such moments, to truly inhabit them rather than always looking ahead to the next task. A breeze lifts the edge of the tent flap, bringing with it the sense of trampled grass, dust, and cooking fires from the camp beyond the tournament grounds. Somewhere nearby, a horse whinnies, perhaps Thunderer sensing another mount he knows. 10 minutes, Sir Robert, comes the young voice of a page outside the tent. 10 minutes until I must be armored again, mounted again, lance in hand again. 10 minutes of peace before returning to the roaring heart of the tournament. I open my eyes, meeting Edmund's knowing gaze, once more into the lists. "Old friend," he says quietly. I nod, straightening in my chair as Thomas approaches with my freshly inspected gambeson. The brief respite has done its work. My breathing is steady, my mind clear. The fatigue remains, but it has transformed into something manageable, a familiar companion rather than an enemy. Once more, I agree, raising my arms to receive the padded garment that will cushion the weight of armor soon to follow. And then we'll see what God and good horsemanship provide. I stand at the edge of the dueling ring, my breath creating small clouds in the cooling afternoon air. The tournament has narrowed to just 4 knights now, the strongest, the most skilled, or perhaps simply the luckiest. My armor bears the marks of the day's earlier matches, a dent on my left pauldron, a scratch across my breastplate where Sir Hugh's blade had slipped past my guard. Small wounds of pride rather than flesh. The crowd's murmur washes over the field like waves against a shore, rising and falling with anticipation. Lords and ladies in their finery occupy the covered stands, while common folk press against the barriers, children hoisted onto shoulders for a better view. They've been here since dawn, watching elimination after elimination, and now they hunger for the climax of the day's spectacle. I roll my sword wrist slowly, feeling the satisfying pop of the joint. My body aches in a dozen places, the price of 4 victories already today. Thomas approaches with a water skin, which I accept gratefully, lifting my visor to drink. The water is cool and tastes faintly of the mint leaves he added earlier, a small mercy for a parched throat. Your next opponent approaches, sir, Thomas says quietly, taking back the water skin. I don't need to look to know who it is. The crowd's sudden swell of noise tells me everything. Half cheers, half something darker. When I do turn, I'm unsurprised to see Sir Elaine walking toward the ring, his squire following with helm in hand. We've circled each other all day, advancing through different brackets of the tournament. Part of me knew it would come to this, perhaps had always been meant to come to this, since that moment of silent challenge in the great hall this morning. Thought you might face Sir Edmund, Thomas says, checking the straps of my armor one final time. I shake my head. Edmund took a hard fall against the German knight. His old shoulder wouldn't hold up against Elaine. I don't add that I'm grateful for this. Better that I face Elaine than my friend with his vulnerable injury. The herald steps forward, a scroll in hand, though he hardly needs it now. He raises his staff, and the crowd gradually quiets. The second match of the semi-finals, he announces, his voice carrying across the field. Sir Robert of Westmoreland, champion of Lord William. A cheer rises from our household knights and the local folk who have known me for years. I raise my sword in acknowledgement, the familiar weight comforting in my hand. Facing Sir Elaine of Aquitaine, champion of Lord Geoffrey. More cheers, especially from the visiting nobles and their retinues. Sir Elaine steps into the ring, removing his helmet to reveal that composed face I observed this morning. Our eyes meet across the churned earth of the dueling ground, and he offers a small nod of respect. I return it without hesitation. Whatever comes next, we are brothers in the code of chivalry. Remember to 3 clean strikes, or until one yields, the herald reminds us, though we both know the rules well. May honor guide your blades. We don each our helmets, the world narrowing to what I can see through my visor. Thomas hands me my shield, battered from the day's fighting but still sound. I flex my fingers around the grip of my sword, a blade I've carried for 12 years, its weight and balance as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. The herald steps back, raises his staff, and brings it down sharply. Begin. Neither of us rushes forward. Instead, we circle slowly, each step measured and deliberate. The crowd's noise seems to fade into a distant hum as my focus narrows entirely to the man before me. His stance is perfect, balanced and relaxed, shield angled precisely, sword held neither too high nor too low. Been watching you all day, Sir Robert, he says, his voice slightly muffled by his helm. You favor your right leg after the third exchange. Old injury, I grunt, neither confirming nor denying. A common tactic, speaking to distract, to test, to provoke an error. I've used it myself countless times. Noticed you drop your shield slightly before you lunge. I counter, subtle but there. A soft chuckle comes from inside his helm. Then we shall both be watching for habits we didn't know we had. He moves first, a quick probing attack that I parry easily. The sound of steel meeting steel rings across the field, drawing an appreciative murmur from the crowd. I respond with a counter that he blocks with his shield, the impact jarring up my arm. And so it begins, the ancient dance of blade and shield, advance and retreat. We move around the ring, as if following steps known only to us, each testing the other's defenses, looking for openings, weaknesses, patterns. Unlike the raw aggression of younger knights, this is a measured, almost scholarly exchange between masters of the craft. Sweat trickles down my back beneath the armor. The late afternoon sun catches on Elaine's sword as he executes a perfect feint, nearly drawing me into overextending. I recover just in time, deflecting his true attack with the edge of my shield. Well read, he acknowledges, stepping back to reset. Minutes pass this way, each exchange teaching us more about the other. The crowd grows restless for blood or victory, but we ignore them, locked in our private conversation of steel and will. My breathing remains controlled, though my arms grow heavier with each parry and strike. Finally, an opening, he shifts his weight a heartbeat too early, telegraphing an attack to my left. I pivot against expectation, stepping into the strike rather than away, our bodies nearly touching as my sword slides past his guard to tap firmly against his ribs. "Strike for Sir Robert," the herald calls. We separate, circling again. I can feel Elaine's increased focus, his slight adjustment in stance. He's taking my measure anew, respecting the threat I pose. "Clever," he says. "Most men back away." "I'm not most men," I reply, "and neither are you." He acknowledges this with a small nod, then attacks with renewed vigor. His blade becomes a silver blur, forcing me to give ground, my shield and sword working frantically to keep his steel from my flesh. It's masterful, a combination taught in the southern schools of swordsmanship that I've seen but rarely faced. My foot catches on an uneven patch of ground, a small stumble, nothing more but enough. His sword slides past my guard, tapping my shoulder with controlled precision. "Strike for Sir Elaine," the herald announces. Even matched now, we separate again, both breathing harder. The crowd's excitement builds, sensing the knife edge of competition. Elaine rolls his shoulder, perhaps feeling the strain of the day's earlier matches as I do. We are not young men, either of us, though we fight with the skill that only experience brings. "Your reputation does you justice," he says during our brief respite. "As does yours," I return. "Shall we continue the education?" We close again, and this time there is no holding back. Each of us has taken the other's measure, and now we apply what we've learned. My blade seeks the tiny hesitation before his shield rises. His sword tests the slight favoring of my right leg. We move as if in a mirror, each countering the other's strengths, exploiting the smallest weaknesses. A quick exchange, parry, riposte, counter, and then an opening appears. I drive forward, my sword arcing toward his helm, only to meet his blade in a perfect parry. The force turns my sword just enough to slide past his guard from an unexpected angle, touching his chest with enough pressure to be felt but not to harm. "Second strike for Sir Robert," the herald calls out. The crowd erupts, sensing the approaching end. Elaine steps back, saluting me with his sword in acknowledgement of the hit. One more strike, and the match is mine. But Elaine is far from defeated. He attacks with renewed focus, driving me back across the ring with a flurry of precise strikes. I block, parry, deflect, each movement draining a little more strength from my already tired arms. He's younger, with more endurance, and he knows it. His strategy becomes clear: wear me down, force a mistake, and it nearly works. My shield arm drops a fraction too low, and his blade darts in, missing my ribs by the width of a fingernail as I twist desperately aside. What saves me isn't skill or strength, but the instinct born of a lifetime in armor. As his momentum carries him slightly past me, I pivot, using the weight of my shield to turn rather than lifting it. My sword follows in a short, economical arc that catches him across the back. A third and final touch. Final strike. The victory to Sir Robert of Westmoreland, the herald proclaims. The crowd roars its approval, not so much for me specifically, but for the display of skill they've witnessed. I lower my sword, suddenly aware again of my aching muscles, the sweat-soaked padding beneath my armor, the thundering of my heart. Elaine removes his helmet, his face flushed with exertion but showing no anger or disappointment, only the respect of one craftsman for another who has executed his art with marginally more success today. "Well fought, Sir Robert," he says, extending his hand. I remove my own helmet, gratefully gulping the fresh air. "The margin was thin as a blade itself," I reply, clasping his arm firmly. "Another day the victory might be yours." "Then I shall look forward to that day," he says with a smile that reaches his eyes this time. As we walk from the ring together, the crowd's cheers follow us. Thomas hurries forward with water and a cloth to wipe my face, his expression gleaming with pride. "The final bout will begin in 1 hour," the herald announces behind us. "Sir Robert of Westmoreland shall face Sir William of York for the tournament championship." I look toward the far side of the field where my final opponent waits, a knight I've known by reputation but never faced. that challenge lies ahead, but for now I simply savor the hard-earned victory and the brief respite before the final test of the day.
The world narrows to a tunnel of sound and sensation. Thunderous hooves pound beneath me, each impact reverberating through my body like a heartbeat. The weight of my armor presses against every inch of my frame, a familiar burden that has become almost a comfort over the years. Through the narrow slit of my visor, I see only what matters: the jousting lane, the fluttering banners overhead, and at the far end, Sir Elaine astride his midnight black destrier. This is our third pass, one victory each. His lance splintered against my shield in the first run, nearly unseating me. In the second, I struck true, the impact so perfect that even Lord Geoffrey stood to applaud. Now this final pass will decide everything. The crowd's roar diminishes to a distant hum as I focus. My breathing slows within the confines of my helm, the metal hot against my face, despite the cooling afternoon air. Sweat trickles down my spine, pooling at the small of my back. My right shoulder throbs dully from the previous impact, not enough to hinder me, but a reminder of what's at stake. God and St. George. I mutter to myself, a prayer and a battle cry in one breath. The marshal raises his staff, then drops it with a swift motion. I squeeze my knees against thunderous sides, and he responds instantly. 7 years together have made us one being in these crucial moments. The ground seems to flow beneath us as we accelerate down the lane, the familiar rhythm of galloping hooves becoming the only music that matters. Across the distance, Sir Elaine charges toward me, his lance steady as a spear. The sun catches on his polished armor, turning him momentarily into a creature of pure light, beautiful and terrible. A worthy opponent. I adjust my grip on the lance, feeling the smooth ash shaft against my palm. Thomas prepared it perfectly, balanced, true, wrapped with leather at the grip to prevent slipping. My shield arm tenses, bracing for impact. Every muscle in my body knows its role in this dance of violence and skill. The distance closes. 100 paces, 50-25. Time slows. I can see the blue and silver of Sir Elaine's surcoat, the gleam of his helm, the steady point of his lance aimed at my left shoulder. Just as Sir Edmund warned, I make a minute adjustment, angling my shield to deflect rather than absorb the blow, while keeping my own lance trained on the center of his shield. 10 paces. 5. Impact. The world explodes into sound and force. My lance strikes his shield dead center, the shock traveling up my arm like lightning. Simultaneously, his lance glances off my angled shield, sliding upward in a shower of splinters. The force still rocks me backward, my boots pressing hard into the stirrups to maintain position. For one breathless moment, I hang in perfect balance between seated and falling. Thunderer continues his charge past Sir Elaine's mount, our momentum carrying us forward as I struggle to right myself. Then gravity makes its decision. I feel myself slipping, the world tilting as my weight shifts too far. With a curse lost in the roar of the crowd, I slide from the saddle, twisting as I fall to avoid landing directly on my back. Years of experience make the difference between injury and mere embarrassment. As I hit the ground in a controlled tumble, my armor rattling like a sack of pots. Dust fills my nostrils as I lie there for a moment, taking inventory of my body. Nothing broken, just my pride. I push up my visor, spitting dirt and wiping my mouth with the back of my gauntlet. My vision clears enough to see Sir Elaine circling back, his own helmet removed. The crowd's reaction tells me what I already know. His seat remained true. The victory is his. Balls and blood, I mutter, pushing myself to my knees, then to my feet. Every joint protests the movement, my body reminding me that I'm not the young knight I once was. But standing is what matters now. Standing shows that I am defeated but not broken.
Thomas appears at my side, concern etched on his young face. Sir Robert, are you injured? Only my dignity, I reply, removing my helmet and handing it to him. The cool air feels glorious against my sweat-soaked hair and face. A fair loss to a worthy opponent. Sir Elaine approaches on foot, having dismounted some distance away. His dark beard is matted with sweat, a red mark across his cheek, where his helmet pressed during impact. He looks younger up close, but his eyes hold the steady gaze of a man who has seen battle, not merely tournaments. Sir Robert, he says, extending his hand, that was masterfully fought. Your deflection nearly unseated me as well. I take his offered hand, clasping his forearm in the warrior's grip. The victory is yours, sir, and well earned. I haven't felt a lance so true since facing Sir William at Shrewsbury 3 summers past. A genuine smile breaks across his face, transforming it from stern to almost boyish. High praise from a knight of your reputation. I studied your technique at Winchester last year. The way you shift weight just before impact. It served me well today. The admission surprises and flatters me. I find myself warming. I considered merely an obstacle to overcome. Then I've defeated myself, in a manner of speaking. I laugh, wincing as my ribs protest. Around us the tournament field buzzes with activity. The crowd continues to cheer, lords and ladies in the stands rising to acknowledge the spectacle they've witnessed. Squires hurry to collect broken lances and clear debris for the awards ceremony to follow. The late afternoon sun casts everything in a golden glow, turning dust motes in the air to floating embers. Come, Sir Elaine says, gesturing toward the marshal's stand. They'll be waiting for us. Together we walk the length of the jousting lane, an unexpected camaraderie forming in the wake of our contest. My body aches with each step, but I keep my back straight, my head high. In victory or defeat, a knight's bearing tells the world who he is. Lord William and Lord Geoffrey await us at the stand, along with Lady Matilda, who holds the tournament prize, a fine silver cup and a purse heavy with silver pennies. Sir Edmund stands nearby, nodding respectfully as we approach. A magnificent contest, Lord William announces as we reach them. Sir Elaine, your skill honors our tournament. Sir Robert, your valor brings credit to our house, as always. I bow, suppressing a grimace as my bruised ribs complain. Thank you, my lord, it was my privilege to represent you. Lady Matilda steps forward, presenting the cup to Sir Elaine. Your victory is well deserved, Sir Knight, she says, then turns to me with a warm smile. And Sir Robert, the court physician has prepared a balm for what I suspect will be impressive bruises by morning. My eternal gratitude, my lady, I reply with a chuckle, though I fear no balm exists for a dented pride. Laughter ripples through the gathered nobles, easing the formality of the moment. As Sir Elaine raises the cup to acknowledge the crowd's cheers, I find myself strangely content despite the loss. There is honor in testing oneself against worthy opposition, in rising from the dust to stand tall before peers and commons alike. Thomas appears again at my elbow carrying a cup of watered wine that I accept gratefully. The cool liquid soothes my parched throat as I look out over the tournament field, now bathed in the golden light of approaching sunset. Banners still flutter in the gentle breeze. Knights and squires move about in the afterglow of competition, and the day's stories already begin to take shape in the tellings and retellings among the crowd. You fought well, Thomas says quietly. They'll speak of that final pass for weeks. Small comfort when my backside will remind me of it with every step, I reply, but without bitterness. I clap him on the shoulder. You served admirably today. The lance was perfectly balanced. His face brightens at the praise, reminding me of myself at his age, eager to prove my worth, to belong in this world of knighthood and honor. Perhaps that's the true victory, not cups or purses, but the continuation of what we value, passed from one generation to the next, like a torch in the darkness. As the formal ceremonies conclude, knights begin to drift toward their pavilions where armor will be removed, wounds tended, and the day's events dissected over wine and food. The tournament is ending, but the connections forged in its crucible, respect between opponents, loyalty between knight and squire, bonds between lords and their champions, these endure. Come, Thomas, I say, handing him back the empty cup. Help me out of this shell before I rust inside it. Tomorrow's another day, and these old bones need rest if they're to serve me in the next contest. We turn toward my blue and silver pavilion, where a basin of clean water, fresh clothes, and perhaps a visit from that court physician with his promised balm await. The tournament field recedes behind us, but its lessons and glories remain, another chapter in the long story of a knight's life.
The door to my chamber closes with a soft thud as Thomas takes his leave, the sound mingling with the gentle crackling of the hearth fire. I am alone at last, the day's triumph still humming through my weary body, like the lingering note of a bell. Christ's mercy, I murmur, sinking onto the edge of my bed. What a day! My fingers trace the ornate silver cup that now sits on my bedside table. Lord William's prize for the tournament champion. In the flickering firelight, the engraving catches shadows, a knight with lance lowered, eternal in his moment of glory. I smile faintly at the irony. The real moment is nothing like this perfect, frozen image. It's chaos and thunder, pain and fear transmuted somehow into victory. The chamber feels different tonight. The same stone walls that have sheltered me for years, the same rushes underfoot, the same tapestries, yet all transformed by the day's events. Even the air seems charged with something I can't quite name, pride perhaps, or the sweet relief of expectations met and exceeded. My body aches magnificently. Each twinge and throb is a badge of honor, a reminder of the 7 jousts it took to claim the day. The worst is my right shoulder, which took the full force of Sir Alan's lance in our final pass. The lance shattered, but I kept my seat, while he tumbled into the dust. The memory brings a grin to my face. Despite the pain, Thomas has already helped me remove my armor, each piece coming away like a shell being lifted from my body. First the helm, then pauldrons, breastplate, gauntlets, piece by piece returning me to just a man. No longer the ironclad symbol that thundered down the lists. The armor now stands on its rack in the corner, a hollow version of myself caught in perpetual readiness. I reach down with a groan to pull off my boots, letting them drop heavily to the floor. My stockinged feet welcome the freedom, toes curling against the cool rushes. Next comes the padded gambeson, sweat soaked from hours beneath steel. As I pull it over my head, the scent of the day rises from the fabric, horse and leather, metal and exertion. Now in just my linen shirt and breeches, I pour water from the pitcher into the waiting basin and bend to splash my face. The water is cool against my skin, washing away the last traces of dust and sweat. I run wet fingers through my hair and beard, combing out tangles, then press a damp cloth to the bruise darkening along my collarbone. The sting makes me hiss between my teeth. The worth it, I mutter to my reflection in the small polished metal mirror. My eyes look back at me, tired but bright with lingering excitement. The gray in my beard seems less prominent tonight, as though victory has pushed back the advance of age, if only for a moment. Outside, the wind has picked up, whistling around the castle towers and rattling the shutters of my window. Rain taps against the glass, gentle at first, then with growing insistence, a fitting lullaby for a warrior's rest. I move to the window, peering out at the darkened tournament field below. Servants had hurried to dismantle the stands and pavilions when the first clouds gathered, but some evidence of the day's glory remains. Trampled earth, forgotten ribbons fluttering from stakes,
the quintain standing like a lone sentinel. Tomorrow it will all be gone, returned to empty meadow until the next contest of arms. The thought brings a melancholy smile to my lips. So it is with glory, brilliant but fleeting. Today they shouted my name. In a month they'll speak of some other champion. But tonight, the victory is mine to savor. I turn from the window and make my way to the small table where Thomas has left bread, cheese, and wine for a simple supper. My appetite, lost in the heat of competition, has returned with surprising force. I tear a chunk of bread, enjoying its yielding softness and nutty flavor, then follow it with a bite of sharp cheese. The wine I sip slowly, a rich burgundy from Lord William's cellar, part of my champion's reward. As I eat, my mind wanders over the day's events. Sir Edmund's knowing nod after my first victory, the approving murmur of the crowd when I unseated the young knight from Northumbria, the moment when my lance struck true against Sir Alan, the impact traveling up my arm like lightning as his steed continued forward without its rider, and afterward, Lord William's public praise, Lady Matilda's favor tied to my arm, and most surprising of all, Sir Alan's grudging respect as he clasped my hand in concession. "You ride well for an old wolf," he had said, his accent thickening with emotion. "You'll ride better when you're an old wolf yourself," I'd replied, and we'd shared a moment of understanding that transcended rivalry. My meal finished, I pour the last of the wine and carry the cup to the hearth. The fire has burned low, orange embers pulsing like a drowsy heartbeat beneath a blanket of gray ash. I add another small log, watching as thin flames lick tentatively around the bark. The chamber is growing cooler as night deepens. I set the cup aside and move to my bed, pulling back the heavy covers and sliding beneath them with a grateful sigh. The linen sheets feel impossibly soft against my skin, the feather mattress yielding perfectly to cradle my battered body. I lie back, letting my eyes trace the familiar patterns of wooden beams overhead. My limbs grow heavier with each breath, sinking deeper into the mattress as though returning to the earth that bore me. The day's images float through my mind like leaves on a stream, colorful, vibrant, but drifting steadily away. The rain continues its gentle percussion against the window, joined now by the deeper rumble of distant thunder. Within the castle walls I am sheltered from the storm, just as the code of chivalry shelters civilization from the tempest of man's baser nature. There is comfort in this thought, in being part of something ancient and enduring. My eyelids grow heavy, weighted by satisfaction and fatigue in equal measure. The pain in my shoulder has subsided to a dull throb, keeping time with my heartbeat. Even this discomfort is welcome. Honest pain, honorably earned. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. There will be offers from other lords seeking a champion, decisions to make about the coming season of tournaments. Thomas needs guidance in his training if he's to be knighted next year as I've promised. My lands to the north require attention before winter arrives. But tonight, in this moment between triumph and tomorrow, there is only rest. Well-earned, hard-won peace. The fire pops and settles, sending a brief spray of sparks up the chimney. Rain taps against stone and glass, a watery applause for a battle well fought. My breathing slows, deepens. I think of my father, long gone to God's embrace. Would he be proud of the knight his son became? I like to think so. His voice seems to whisper with the wind, an echo of lessons taught long ago. Stand true, protect the weak, honor your word. I have tried, father, I have tried. My thoughts grow vaguer, edges softening as sleep approaches. The tournament field transforms in my mind's eye, no longer packed earth but a golden meadow stretching toward eternity. My ancestors watch from the distance, waiting to welcome me when my final joust is run. But not yet, not tonight. Tonight is for savoring victory, for resting weary muscles, for dwelling in that perfect moment when lance met shield and the world held its breath. My eyes close fully now, surrendering to the gentle pull of slumber. The sounds of the castle, distant footsteps, the call of the night watch, The crackle of the fire blend into a soothing melody that carries me toward dream. In my last moments of wakefulness I smile. Tomorrow's sun will rise on Sir Robert, tournament champion, but for now I am simply a tired knight, content in the knowledge of honor upheld and glory achieved, drifting into well-deserved rest.